Hey guys, the Mind Muscle Project is a podcast in Australia. Their two founders came out here. They did a podcast with Noah, Travis, and a bunch of our coaches. They've been really supportive to us over the years. I wrote the foreword to their training journal. A couple of our athletes and coaches are also featured in there. They did a bunch of podcasts that we wanted to put up on our YouTube page because Chris happened to be here and film them. So go check out their podcasts, subscribe to their iTunes, listen to their other episodes, and hopefully you enjoy the ones that we did here at TTTHQ.
What have you got?
These are Tediva or something.
Oh, wow.
How could your feet be too wide? Those are the widest shoes ever.
Shoes.
Man, my feet, these are wide too. My feet fucking hang off the sides of them.
Oh, well,
Ultimate dust fit.
I have blocks for feet.
Flipper feet.
Oh, man.
What size are you? Size 10. Wide.
10 wide, 12 long.
So when it says true to size, it's like not true to your size. It's like true to other people's size. You know what's crazy is you look at the feet of a lot of basketball players, a lot of people that have, size 16 feet when they're 12. Obviously, there's basically no shoes that can fit them, and they want the cool, like, Air Jordans and stuff like that when they play. So they have to go, like, size 12.
Yeah.
And they ram their toes into the shoe. Have you seen LeBron James' toes? Have you seen his toes? Oh, let me show you this.
So are they, like, fucking squeezed in like this?
Well, I thought it was performance enhancing. Because when I went to a lecture from, like, the guy that makes Air Jordans, he said that, like, the tighter the shoe, the better. For basketball.
For force production?
Yeah, I think just
like
changing directions and stability.
Yeah.
So he's trying to make a shoe that when you stop playing, like stop moving, the shoe relaxes. And then when you start going again, it like tightens around the foot.
Oh my God. That's not going to
What?
Yeah.
Okay. You're looking at the feet of the greatest basketball player of all time.
Yeah.
How? How?
Man.
I reckon they've designed a shoe where, like, when he puts his toe in, it must just, like, grab onto his toe and pull it down to the ground. That's nasty.
Dude, that pinky toe is going to fall off.
Yeah,
It's completely
it's useless.
non-functional.
No, it's completely useless. It's
Yeah.
just sitting off the ground, just chilling. It's just atrophied completely.
Oh, so much
Doesn't
worse
even use
than
it.
I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. It must make you think that even though we say all this stuff about the feet being super important and that sort of thing, with the right equipment, you can get around so much stuff with the right adaptation, right?
Well, I mean, he's working out on a flat floor all the time.
That's
so
true.
he probably doesn't need that much, but that'll probably, at some point, cost him something.
When that day comes.
I'm not sure he's going to care with the amount of millions in his bank and his
Man,
legacy and
probably
everything
billions.
that he does.
Yeah. I wonder if he'll ever make a shoe. The James. No, what's
He has a
Jordan?
Yeah,
He has
they
a shoe.
Yeah.
Oh shit. Oh shit. But are they as nice as Jordans?
They're not as famous.
Who?
I mean,
Nike?
Yeah.
they're probably equally as well made.
Yeah.
You can't. Jordan's a Jordan, man.
Yeah, there's only one Jordan. That's the thing. Jordan, probably not as good, obviously, but more of a legacy, I think. And that's why most people will consider him the greatest of all time before that.
Yeah, I think you need to give it probably time before the argument's settled.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Jordan had a severe gambling problem as well, which sort of tainted his thing. Isn't that, not to get too deep into conspiracies on the Training Think Tank podcast, but
Have we started?
yeah.
Oh, cool.
We've started. The wasn't it, so Jordan's own gambling debt cost his dad's life, didn't it? I heard that the guys that wanted the money off Jordan killed his dad got shot. That's a fact. And I heard that's what it was because of.
I have no idea.
Really?
Yeah, it's interesting.
What was his gambling problem? Betting on himself to win.
No, that gamble paid off.
Yeah, I
He
think he
did
was
all
all
right
right
with
on
that
that.
one.
He was all right on that.
Yeah.
All right, so I wanted to, really the only question I had that I wanted to start with this, I brought it up in a few other podcasts, but it seems like when we first spoke, which Raf and I were trying to figure out, it was before episode 100. So it was...
Have I been? I just have been on one, right?
No, you've
Or
been on two.
Yeah, two.
Yeah. Kyle's been on the most. Kyle's got the record. He's got 4. Yeah.
Like, of everybody?
All time.
Oh, man.
Yeah, all time.
No, Brent Fikowski's had 4 episodes.
No, but Kyle has actually been on 4 separate
Oh,
times.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
4 separate times. Yeah, he's been on once by himself initially,
One with
then
Brandon.
one with Brandon, then back on by himself initially, and then one with Evan. So 4.
Nice.
So he's the most popular podcast guest. But I was going to say that it seems like since we have spoken the first time, you changed your mind on a lot of ideas about, in particular, how you run Training Think Tank and how you want it to be. The most obvious one from what we've seen from the outside is bringing in Chris, obviously, who's like just a media machine. What other things have changed over time? And this is something you say yourself, you want to be as fluid and as flexible as possible about your ideas.
Yeah.
What are some of the things particularly related to Training Think Tank that have changed the direction of the company?
Well, I think the initial thought, like even Training Think Tank as a name, was to get as many people as I possibly could that I thought were talented to help grow the organization. And I think my mind state was really hyper-focused on making that coaching for a long time, where it was like, I want to get as many really good coaches that are really passionate about being good at coaching and building a coaching business as I possibly can. And then it just really, you come down to the practical problem of figuring out like, okay, well, I pay my coaches a pretty good percentage because I want to keep them around and I want to make sure that I take care of them if they're helping me build this organization. So like, to the bottom line, as a business, doesn't really pay off to continue building an index of coaches. And it also cost me a lot of time, just oversight on programs, mentoring, sitting in consults. Like, I just spent a lot of time working with the coaches as I first brought them on. And then I was like, okay, well, that's not a viable long-term play for me. So let's kind of put bringing new coaches on pause. And then it became a matter of like scalability, and from a visibility perspective, I saw like we coach so many people all over the world in different sports, pretty big, I guess, representation in like the competitive CrossFit realm. The business is growing. It was growing at like 30% a year, just like all on word of mouth. And we had the Instagram account, but it was like John doing it, like just posting videos, or like we would repost our clients' stuff, and it was growing. But I knew that relative to looking out in the market, there's all these businesses that have these professional platforms and YouTube, and I'm like, all right, well, if we have good ideas and we can't get them out there in a way that are digestible and that people like them, then it's really fucking worthless. So when Mike came on board, actually...
McGoldrick?
Yeah, McGoldrick. That's when kind of the thought that, okay, I need a media person to really help me with the direction of how to do this. I'm not really a big consumer of social media, so it's hard for me to try to figure out what's good and what's not good. Like, right. I'm not educated in it. So Mike initially came on board, and then that kind of translated into Chris coming on board, and that kind of opened the floodgates of visibility. And opening the floodgates of visibility is a good thing, but without the business infrastructure to support visibility, I didn't want to completely change everything that I was doing in the first place. So then it was kind of okay, what's the next step in terms of trying to figure out, like, what's the purpose of what I'm trying to do? What does this mean to me? What's going to mean to the market? What do I want to do long term? And then just practically, how do I make money on that so I can continue to grow it over time? So I guess some of the things that have changed is, obviously, I've froze the coaches, which I kind of already said, and I'll probably go through another hiring run because we have a waiting list that it kind of goes in flux, because sometimes it's like 5 or 6 months or 7 months before people come off the waiting list, and after that point, sometimes they've already gotten coaches or sought help elsewhere, but it continues to kind of build, and people have interest in it. So I'll probably do a hiring run at some point on like new coaches. But in 2013, I started Athlete WOD with one of my clients back
I remember
in the
that
day, which was like a group training program.
It was like your first content that was out there of you, like between the OPT transition. Like no one knew what you were doing except for your own clients. Yeah, for sure. So I did that. It was pretty successful. I mean, back then there weren't really that many public blogs, and we had like over 100 something people like in the first couple of months. And I was like, wow, this is a really good business. This is way easier than coaching. But it had its problems in terms of trying to get the right people segmented into the right groups, trying to get people educated on all the ancillary stuff with regards to training. Like, people's lifestyles were completely shitty, and they were trying to be in the advanced training group. Like, and I knew what that turns into long term. So it's really cool, and people are like fired up about jumping into a program that some guy who coaches games athletes, like, I get to be on that program, and then like 3 months later they have decrepit knees, no shoulders, no hormones. It's your fault.
And I don't know if it's my fault or not, but I feel like
They'll say that.
Yeah, I mean, I at least have some sort of an obligation to educate people on what the appropriate way to progress for their lifestyle is. So I'm trying to create a model for what the group training program for TTT is going to look like. And it's going to be different from what's in the market, in that I'm going to have a lot of it be teaching people how to kind of coach themselves and guide them through construction of a training week that makes sense for their lifestyle, that allows them to transition goals. We talked about it like the first day you were here off air, that you were like, I feel like at some point you got to do what the type of training that gets you excited. And I think that's true. And I think a lot of people are really excited when they first get into CrossFit because it is exciting. Like you get training partners, super
Olympic weightlifting, gymnastics.
It's competitive, strong, exciting. The skills are really hard to attain, so you're like passionate about the quest. And then at some point, like either the delusion of where you thought you were going to be breaks, or
that's always a good one.
Or you realize just how much of a grind it's going to be, like joint problems, motivation to like try to dig into those hard workouts. And you can't keep up with the stimulation anymore. So I wanted to create a platform that allows us to kind of bridge communities, to bring in low intensity work, movement work, competitive fitness or CrossFit sports style stuff, and create that infrastructure where everybody can have the same subset of workouts to choose from, and then the community is built by each person kind of selecting how does that week look for them, and how can I add, like for you said you were going to go back and do martial arts, so like, all right, if you were going to jump on this program, which one of the components of the program makes sense for you to support martial arts, to support your joint health, to support your endocrine system, to support kind of maintaining your base level of fitness needs, so that if martial arts at some point becomes non-exciting to you, the transition process to get back into something else isn't super long, because I feel like people's bodies self-organize to the shit they're doing, then they got to unwind the damage after doing that for a period of time, and I don't really think that's the best long-term strategy for fitness. And I learned that myself because I'm super obsessive, so I would jump into these quests and like fuck everything else, like it's just this for now. And then you realize that the integration of all those things is kind of more important for not just for sport, but for long-term health. So I'm creating that, and then simultaneously we're upgrading all the educational content that we first picked out, because I want to professionalize that. I mean, I don't know what it's going to turn into long-term. People have asked me if I'll affiliate TTT and create distance ones, if I'll create certifications, and I do envision, if things work, that I'll go down that route. But TTT is relatively young, and the visibility kind of exploded really quickly, and I'm very careful about not just trying to capitalize on that quickly just to make money and to get bigger, knowing that if I do that and I put a bunch of people out there that aren't good coaches, that say they're TTT coaches, that I could erode what that quality means in the market. So we're upgrading the courses from the originals, which were just really me and Kyle sat down. We brainstormed about everything that we knew about coaching, all of our experience. And we basically said, like, all right, here are our training models, got in front of a camera in the basement, blasted them out. I mean, I literally put note cards up with like 2 or 3 notes, and then I would like word vomit for 20 minutes, and that would be a section. Those courses are still up, and we get a lot of really good feedback, but they're older and outdated relative to what we believe and what we do. And so part of my thought process is, because that was a very big portion of our revenue streams, is like, I want to make sure that all the people that supported us from the beginning get the new upgraded stuff as we kind of make the transition to more professionalize the educational model, and that we have an infrastructure to build whatever the next step is, because it's impossible to mentor without some sort of a baseline language. Like, people come from all different backgrounds and they don't know anything about what we do or our models, or they have their preconceived frameworks in their head. Like, if I say strength, somebody thinks all of the things that in their experience are strength. So it might just be weightlifting to them, but that doesn't include throwing carries, strongman, strength repeatability, like all of the stuff that we would need to say, like, okay, well, this is the framework we use. And then if somebody has a goal that's not CrossFit, these are the things that are applicable to that specific goal. So we're working on making sure that all of those are good. And I think that's really the core evolution of what we're working on at the moment. I think everybody is pretty hyper-focused on that. And Chris was a major component in doing that, because I don't think that I really thought about the message of course delivery is not just the content and the words, which is what I thought originally. It was just like, well, put good shit out there. It's like a book. Like a good book doesn't need to like have a fucking pretty cover and all this shit. But the reality is, in a competitive market like this, it is about how it looks, how it sounds, how easy it is to digest, how easy it is to log in, keeping them engaged over time, breaking the content up so that people can fit it into their busy lives. So we've been putting a lot of work and thought into that. And we actually redid the entire the first one, the movement course. We redid the entire thing, had a second iteration of it, and then we're like, no, it's not good enough, and redid the whole thing another time. So that was that's costly to the business. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of my time, but we're committed to trying to make quality as like the number one thing of the stuff we're putting out. So hopefully it works out.
Yeah, we were talking about it in the car, because there's like another popular coaching organization that we won't name, but they made the decision that you're not making, which is to, okay, let's hire coaches. Let's maybe not spend as much time on coach selection necessarily. And from the rapid growth, obviously there's a lot of new clients and customers. So more people that I knew were jumping on with them, and then they would tell me what they were getting. And I was with them ages and ages ago. And what I got then was far different to what they get now, and what my friends get now, I feel, is very, very, very poor in quality. And it massively affects even me just hearing that. It has a trickle effect, right? I hear that, oh, that coach gave their athlete this, and this at this time of year for this person. That's obviously not. And then they spoke to their friend, they got the exact same thing, but it's supposed to be individualized, and that's it. Like, it's done now. Yeah, that's it. You ruined it.
Yeah, I feel like you only got one shot to build your reputation.
Yeah.
And once you start capitalizing on your reputation and evolving what you do, I feel like you can ruin it and instantly change the nature of how people perceive you. And it's the CrossFit fitness, functional fitness space is a relatively small community, and I think there's a small number of leaders out there that kind of drive the reputation of different organizations. And if those people start to hear, oh, this person that doesn't have any integrity with regards to how he coaches, and that gets out, then you're just going to have a really hard time acquiring new people to hear about what you have to say. Even if you just made a mistake and you're like, oh fuck, that's not the way we want to go anymore, and you want to backtrack and like get back to quality, it's too hard to do that, because once you've already lost people's trust, it's gone. So I've been, I don't know, maybe too careful with regards to how I grow the business, but it's been something that I've always thought about, that I feel like the current digital fitness coaching infrastructure, even outside of CrossFit, is very low human contact, very low quality, and very high volume at a low cost. And that's just it's a hard thing to have long-term customers like that. So I think you just see a lot of churn, and you see like the hype cycles. Somebody blows up, huge for 2 or 3 years, and then you're like, where did that person go? And I knew, like, well, if I'm going to do this, if I want this to be my business for life, I can't set my infrastructure up. So I need really good people. I need people that are good at what they do outside of what I am good at. Like, I know media stuff, the creation of media, marketing material, all of that stuff is just not really my forte. I didn't go to school for it. I never really put my time into it. I knew that I wouldn't have time to invest in like staying current on all the scientific research if I was stepping into more of a CEO role. So I needed people like Kyle and Evan to make sure that I had people to lean on when I'm like, dude, I haven't fucking read a piece of research in a year, but I've talked to them 100 times over the course of the year. So it's not like I've lost touch with where the current research is and how things are evolved. So I feel like I've done a lot of things right, but it's just it's a learning experience. I'm sure like every quest to do anything, I'm sure like in your podcast you've evolved and tried to figure out how do I maintain my place in this market and not fuck it up as things change. No, the with all things you got to keep evolving, right? And it's cool that you do.
What would you say that, coming into this season this year, how did things change for you as as a coach? Because I know you said you would never give up coaching, right?
Yeah.
Have you narrowed down the pool of athletes that you work with to give yourself more time for the CEO roles?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I think I was around 35 athletes at I guess I call the beginning of the year the end of the CrossFit Games season.
Yep.
So August of last year. And for a really long time, I mean, my average digital customer, client, athlete, really call them probably friends at this point, when I went through my analytics was 3.5 years. And that included new people that I took on. So my own personal churn rate was just really low. People weren't leaving. And I had them on at really low price points because
loyalty.
Yeah, well, and as my visibility increased and as I became more popular, I knew there was more demand for me. I knew I could get more money, but I was well, these people built my reputation.
Yeah.
So why am I going to be screw you, pay me more? So I struggled for about a year before I actually reached out because I didn't want them to think they weren't important. I didn't want them to think that they weren't a really integral part of this organization getting built. I had really good relationships, and I still have relationships with a lot of those people. So I reached out to a lot of them. There were a couple that kind of fired back and were basically don't leave me, that I ended up keeping on. But I think I think my current client load's at 16 or something,
right,
which is really manageable. And a lot of them are here, which increases the time in some ways, but it decreases the actual computer time.
Yeah.
Because I can, Travis can come out and talk to me if there's a typo in his program and be like, what does this mean? Or what's this movement? Or I'll just write a movement, and instead of, sometimes it's something that we're working on a position and I make up a name for. So seated pike, single leg lift, isometric. And there's no YouTube video for that. But I'll just say single leg pike, come to my office and I'll explain what it is.
Never mind. Just come to the office.
I got to make sure I put a reminder for myself about what the movement is. This movement, come see me. So that transition was good. But just that time gets filled in with other stuff, new hires means new amount of time that's dedicated. Me and Chris have been working a lot together, I think, to build a creative process together. He has ideas, I have ideas. Generally, if I need to work creatively, I need silence and I need to be alone. So I do that stuff at home. But then I do that. I come in, I bring him the ideas. He makes the ideas better or challenges them. And I'm like, fuck, I just did 3 hours of work on this last night. And now I need to go back to the drawing board and kind of upgrade it. So working on myself, being a little bit more patient, brainstorming first before I really sit down and do my hard work. So that the time of trying to create those systems so that I can be dialed in is still probably more overwhelming than the amount of time I saved by passing off either to, a lot of those people went to other coaches, or a lot of them are just they were kind of coaching themselves anyway, where I was kind of more of an accountability measure for them. They would keep me on as a coach because they knew that if they had to report their results to me, they were more likely to train. But I kind of told them at some point, you got to fucking hold yourself accountable. You can't be paying me whatever $300 a month or wherever the price point was just to make sure that you're doing your workouts. If it's not important to you, then you got bigger problems.
Yeah. No, I think Travis mentioned that he made you charged him $100 if you didn't report the program, and he didn't think you'd actually do it. And then when he saw the debit come out on his statement, he was like, "You motherfucker!" It's I was joking.
Yeah.
And then from there, it was not an issue after that.
Yeah. I mean, it's their job. So if I was Travis's boss and he didn't do his work, he'd get fired, which essentially is losing money. So then you're in a position where really Travis is a client of mine. So if it's a weird position, how do I hold this dude accountable as a coach, but he's also paying me to coach him at the same time. So I was like, well, you know what? The best way to do that is his visibility and his successes and whatever is going to help me and my platform grow. And if he's not doing his shit, it reflects badly on me. So that was the best system I could come up with to kind of keep him dialed in, and it fucking worked. I mean, like, one time $100 charge on your fucking bank account because you didn't report your daily food and your results, and like his wife reminds him every night. He's got an alarm that goes up, and it just like, you know, it professionalizes the system, and it kind of takes the ease of the burden off of me not having to be the asshole, like, you know, hey, did you do your workout yesterday? Where are your results? I just hate doing that. I'd much rather have people that are like, you know, I'm into this as much as you're into this, and every night you're going to get your results unless there's, you know, something happening, and then I'll send it the next morning. So, yeah.
What did you say? Well, Noah said that you gave him a little speech after day 1 and then day 2, but it was sitting relatively pretty at that point.
Yeah.
What was your, without disclosing word for word, what was the conversation like with Travis going in after day 2 going into day 3 this year?
So after day 2, he was in 7th, I think. And he was like 30 something points out.
Yeah.
And it was really, I mean, I'm pretty blunt just in general. I try not to do that in a mean way of like, oh, you fucking put yourself in this position again. Yeah.
What the fuck?
In some ways it was kind of like that. It was like, dude, you know, you've been here before, you know what you need to do. I said, I think it's more competitive and there might be less deviation, for you to take advantage of, because both of those workouts, I mean, at this stage, most people can rope climb. Like it's not enough of them, and it wasn't legless where I think people could like really get to the point of failure, at least on the male side. I didn't think that would happen. The step overs did seem to break a lot of people, but it didn't seem to break the people that were in contention that much. And I know Ethan Helbig was a big dude. Ben Smith, I just, you know,
Ben Smith.
Ben Smith. I knew Noah was up there. Alex Smith, I didn't really know what he'd be able to do. Cotley, I'm aware of him, but I'm not aware of like what he's good at, what he's not good at. Like, I didn't really know the specifics, but I just was like, look, I think you need to go out there with the mind state that you got to win both workouts, and I think you have the capability to do that. He had pretty good training runs of both of them, and like, Trav says that he needs the pressure sometimes. He needs his back to be up against the wall. And I was like, well, you got what you fucking want. Your back's up against the wall, so now you got to do it. So it was relatively brief. I did tell him that I think he needs to put his headphones on and just be a little bit more quiet in the back and just like keep himself more focused, because just I think maybe it was a little bit too loose in the beginning, which is also a function maybe of the constructs of the workouts, because the first workout's a 49-minute long, or not 49, but I mean anywhere from 35 to 40-something minute workout. So you can't be too jazzed up and tight and excited for that. So that kind of like, in order for him to operate well on that, he's going to be a little bit more calm. Bench press, definitely something he needed to work on, and which we went through a really extensive phase on like 2 or 3 years ago. Got it up to a competitive, maybe it was 2 years ago, got it up to a competitive number. He benched like 315, which isn't great, but relative to competitive CrossFitters, I thought was like okay enough. And I'm like, well, it's never tested. Like, you know, you don't need to do it that much. So we might have hit it like 6 times in the year, which is like another year feeling like you get caught with your pants down as a coach. So we knew that that was going to be an issue. So we had a strategy for how to attack that. But he can't really go into Linda like with that, like, oh yeah, I'm going to attack this workout type mentality, because there's a self-imposed limiter that's built into the workout. So I think he was just a little bit more calm, which is not how he operates best as an athlete. Like, he needs to be a little agitated and uncomfortable. So I just kind of gave him a little reminder, which he probably would have done anyway, to put himself in that, like, you know,
that zone.
Yeah, like in that zone where it's like, I gotta fucking win, and I gotta be more uncomfortable than everybody else, because stepping over a box with 70-pound dumbbells 50 times is really, I mean, for most people, unless you're getting to grip failure or leg failure, it's just dealing with a lot of discomfort. And he's good at that. So yeah, that's kind of what the conversation was, but it was quick. I mean, we don't really have that many words that need to be exchanged at this level of our coaching career, and I think we both knew we wanted to go back to the game, so he was going to do that regardless. As
a coach, I can imagine, and even as a spectator, the regionals is far more exciting. So I can only imagine that as a coach, the regionals must be exponentially more stressful than the games.
Man, people say that. I think there's more risk inherent in the regionals because, like, Travis didn't make it.
Yeah.
So there's only 6 workouts, so the point differential makes it a little bit more tight. But I think it's really a matter of expectations because I have, some people that made regionals for the first time where they go into regionals and they're like, I just want to gain experience. So for them, if they take 30th or 35th or 25th, it's not stressful to me. I'm like, all right, well, your expectations were set where it's really where people's expectations are that I think that drives my stress as a coach. Because if they expect to do well, then I know they're going to be disappointed if they don't do well. And then I'm tense and agitated beforehand because I'm like, oh, fuck, are they going to do well? Are they going to do well? And then afterwards, if they're really disappointed, I'm like, what's my role? Like, what do I say to somebody when I know that they're going to be heartbroken, they're going to be sad, they're going to question a lot of shit they did? What do I do in that scenario? Do I console them? Do I tell them, well, it just wasn't fucking good enough? Get back on it and figure it out. Decide if you want to do this. And that role as a coach for me is really difficult because I don't really deal with, I guess, other people's emotions the same way I deal with mine. I think I just try to be like, well, fuck it, it's a feeling, move on. Which it's probably not healthy, but...
They come out another time.
Yeah. So it's stressful in a different way. The games is stressful as hell, and I think will be more stressful this year, being that Noah's going to be my sole focus. Last year he took 4th, so both of us have the goal that he's going to do better, which means not the expectation, because I know he took 15th in 2016 and then 4th last year, so it could be like, well, maybe we take a step back, but we both want to be on the podium, right? Like, we've been working all year to figure out what statistically does he need to get better at. He's a great competitor. We know he's going to execute on game day. We know that, like, there were certain things at the games in the past that have gotten him that don't get him in the open and regional phases of competition, so we worked on all those things. So both of us want to be on the podium. So if he goes out there and he's in 8th after day 3, like, that's going to be fucking stressful and hard to swallow because we put a lot of time and effort into the quest this year. So it'll be stressful. It's also longer. Like, we don't know the workouts. There's a lot more, like, I don't even want to call it strategizing at that point, but there's a lot more talking. Like, by day 3, their fucking legs are trashed. Then you have to strategize relative to, like, what heat you're in, where you need to go, who else is in contention around you, because the point differential starts to spread from, like, it was Matt Frazier, and then it was like the people from 2 to 5, and then it was like 5 to 10. So you can kind of race individuals. So you can start to create your pace strategies as race strategies instead in that type of environment. So I think for me, there's a lot more, like, cognitive processes going on at the games. But there's also so much out of your control, man. It's hard to execute over that many days, under that many contractions, under that much fatigue, under that much pressure. It's a little less stressful going there with somebody like Noah, who you have faith is going to execute to his ability, but it's still stressful. And I still go there wanting to win. Like, a lot of people, I think, just look at Matt Frazier and they're just like, wow, he's unbeatable. And I'm like, well, I think everybody can get beat, right? Like, especially in a sport like this. So, you get a small tweak and work out one of the first week in the first day of the games. It's going to be hard to keep going, at that intensity. So,
like, if he rips his hand really badly on a workout.
Something like that.
It's like, all right, blood in the water.
Yes, and if the vulnerability gets shown, I think it also will change the psyche and the motivation of the other athletes involved, like, especially anybody that thinks that they were in contention for second before that. So I go in with that level of I guess projection about what could happen, because that's what excites me. It's not going to excite me being like, hey, let's strategize to get 5th. I 5th would be awesome, but it's still just not how I think. I'd rather set my expectations that, like, hey, we're going there and everybody that I'm with wants to win if they have some experience in that game, and then if it doesn't work out, we cope with the disappointment, then set the bar lower so that we can meet it and be like, okay, well, next year we'll come back and try to do better than that. It's never been how I operate. It
was interesting because I remember when we spoke to you last with Noah, you basically were a little, not worried, but just a little bit apprehensive to commit to anything yet, because you're like, well, I haven't really done much with him yet. He's good anyway. I don't know how much I can add. We found some holes. We're working on them. Obviously, it paid off tremendously. I think that was, for anyone paying attention, was probably good reinforcement that what you can do as a coach, obviously, can make a big difference in already high-level athletes. So my question is, do you feel like you have closed that gap on for another year on the stuff that he had as holes last year? Obviously, you'd have bigger holes, and then you would have closed the gap. And what about this year?
I mean, just the only thing I can really operate on is data. And I know training data doesn't really translate to competitive data, but Noah has shown that his competitive ability always exceeds his training numbers. Like he beat every single one of his training metrics from the regionals by a pretty large margin, with the exception of event 3, where he got a muscle up, no rep. He fell on the ramp once, and then he got I think he got 6 pistol no reps. Like he ran up for the first set, went down, they no rep that one, and then they no rep the other one because of the you're supposed to do it on the same leg if you get no repped, even though it was the first one, so it wouldn't have been alternating. But regardless, that little time I think would have been the 10 or 15 seconds that would have given him the event record on that one. So his time was like 2 seconds off or something. But he showed the ability to execute there. So really all I can do is say, let's elevate your training level so that when you go to competitions and the pressure's on and your fans are there screaming for you, that it shines at a brighter level. So he PR'd his deadlift, and I think more importantly, like when he deadlifted 500 in the 2016 games.
Yep.
Which is
at
his
the ranch
worst finish, which is before I was coaching him. It trashed his back, and I think that might have been one of the catalysts, along with the really long run that started it out, which was also hill running and climbing and a lot of heat. And I just don't think he was physiologically or psychologically prepared for that. And I think starting off with a 30-something place in a run, I think probably also potentially did some psychological, not damage, but just put him in the wrong frame of mind for the competition for that specific event.
Right.
So his back was just ruined, and he PR'd his deadlift in that event. Then shortly after we started working together, he wanted to do the Dubai qualifier. And he tried to build up to a deadlift because there was a max deadlift in that qualifier, and he pulled like 485 or something, and it just ruined his back again. He had been dealing with some sort of like a hamstring insertion issue for a really long time before we started working together. So a lot of the work we did for that first year wasn't really necessarily about building his deadlift. It's about giving him structural integrity to be able to tolerate deadlift progressions.
Right.
And we didn't really have that much time because we started working together, and then shortly after he went to Wadapalooza, and then the Open was like a couple months after that. So we really only had like one good training phase, and then the competitive build up in last year, which was, he's a really fast adapter, so it still ended up being good. This year we had the time to actually improve. So he pulled 510, and it was pretty easy. It was in a normal session. It was in a high volume phase leading into regionals. No soreness the next day. He trained. That was good. PR'd his back squat. The run workout this year, the 333, he did really well. He executed. I mean, his time was faster than Fraser's. I don't know what that really means. Like, I don't know if the heat was different from, one region to the next region. Like, you don't really know what was going on. But to have that kind of statistical improvement, knowing that running was something that we really wanted to work on, and more importantly, running in different situations. Like, if it's just like the run last year, he's a really good swimmer as a result of being water polo in his background. So it might not necessarily have been that his running was good in that event, then the swimming cost people more that weren't equipped to swim well. So he could have potentially gained some time on the swim, been good enough on that first run, which is only 1.5 miles, and then in the end, people are cramping coming out of the water out of the swim because they've never done swimming into running. So I think he kind of got away with that structure last year to be in, I think he took 6th or 7th in that event.
Yep.
So to be in a workout where it was just like rowing, which is traditionally something that wasn't a super strong suit for him, then double unders, which he's pretty good at, and then into a 3-mile continuous run, and to be in the middle of the pack with when I aggregated the 40 games athletes, I think over that workout he ended up 13th or something. So, and a lot of Fraser was like 18th or something like that. So to see that on a cross comparison, I think was okay, this is a good sign that you can now go in this long, continuous, monotonous, grinding style workout, which is traditionally not something you like. It's not where you can break up reps and take advantage of contraction speed and do well. So to be on those two ends of the spectrum and have the long running improve, to have his swimming metrics get better, which is already a strength, to have him still be good at the gymnastics, to have his absolute strength metrics come up, to have put the work in on strongman stuff, to start working on grip stuff. I mean, I don't know if that rope climb thing was really an indication of a grip limitation, but just working on it anyways. I think it sets him up that it could be good, but anything can happen on game day. So I don't look at that and be like, okay, now you can win.
But the data is there.
I look at it and I'm like, all right, we had a good training year. Your body's healthy. Now let's see what happens. It's more just a confidence booster type year.
I just imagine you sitting on the keyboard and him being like, how can I do it? You're like, press enter. You can win. Done the math.
The Excel sheet.
Yeah, I do have a lot of those, but I think I really do that to satisfy my own anxiety more than anything else. Yeah. Or maybe make him believe. You know, because that confidence is something that athletes
can go a long way.
Yeah, I mean, if people just believe that they're capable of doing it, it might be the most important. Like, people talk about the mental game all the time, and they talk about all these strategies for dealing with the psyche, but belief is a really hard thing to try to manifest by the way that you think or the thoughts that you attach to. So trying to figure out what actually is going to make somebody believe that when they step on the starting line of the first event that they genuinely believe that they can win. So it's something I try to do all the time. I try to reinforce his confidence. I don't know if it works or not.
Yeah, it does seem like from the outside, like nothing changing, but Ricky getting pulled out, like increased his confidence a lot, because he was like, before he was like, oh, I didn't actually get on the podium. And now he's like, he got pulled out and he's like, oh, I basically did get on the podium. Yeah. And like, I definitely can do it now.
Yeah. I mean, I think really the defining moment, if this year goes really well, the defining moment for Noah is the being in second place on the last day of the games. I know the last day didn't go well, and I think there are a lot of reasons for that, but knowing that you could be that deep into the CrossFit Games in second place is just like, I mean,
and it wasn't by much.
Yeah. I don't know what type of reinforcement you need more than that to know, like, all right, I'm capable of being one of the best people in the world at this sport.
Yeah. That belief is almost it's at the highest level, almost seems like it is the determining factor as to if you will win or not. Because you look at the people and, whether they believe it fully and still have doubts, which they probably do, but the percentage of which they believe compared to other people, you look at like Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Conor McGregor, those sort of people, you see that level of belief that they have. It's almost what you, at the highest level, you need to reinforce. So anything you can do that will add that belief, like, hey, just so you know, like you beat Matt Fraser in like these 6 workouts. Yeah. It's like, man, I can do this. Yeah. Like I can, and then that will change their performance more than whatever progression you gave them in training.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the people that win are aware of that. And I think they play intimidation games and hide their vulnerabilities. I don't necessarily think that, I mean, I think swallowing your vulnerabilities and not sharing them is going to at some point undermine your confidence if adversity happens on the big stage. Right. But I don't know if it's a case of winning reinforces that self-belief and then makes people realize how valuable it is in their ability to perform, because you can discourage other people from even trying to race you. Yeah. Or I don't know what it is that actually drives that, but I know that it's important, and I don't know if it's like a chicken or the egg type thing. I would like to be able to try to figure out how to engineer that type of belief. But if it can't be that type of belief in winning, at least that type of belief in ability to execute up to the highest level of your potential. And I don't think I've ever been to a competition where, with any athlete, where I've left and was like, that was flawless. Like, there's nothing you could have done better.
Right.
And so I've been kind of always focused on that. It's like, what moments were there in there that are indicative of you still having a need to get better at? And if we find them, then that's what we need to focus on, is making sure that those things start to get reduced over time. And then, if you win, and then you get that added, like, okay, now all of those actions lead to winning. Maybe it just like increases self-belief even farther. I'm not really sure how it works, because I haven't really been, there's not been that many champions. There's only been the 3 male champions in however many years. Rich was 4, and then
Ben
in 8 years.
Yeah, and then Matt twice. Yeah, so
pretty much for 8 years, everyone's been trying to get second.
Yeah. So that's I think what you need to kind of you need like a lot of close contact with that to really understand what drives it. But then also, Ben has won. Does he still have it? Does he still have that belief and confidence? I'm not really sure. I mean, it doesn't seem like it at the regional level. He obviously didn't win last year at the games, so like maybe he lost it and needs to get it back, or maybe it's just we think of there being some magical self-confidence thing that those people have, and it's really just like bravado that they're using leading in for marketing and building their brand. I'm not really sure what goes on inside people's heads, inside their emotions, especially on game day, because it's so chaotic.
Yeah, I tend to think of the fact that most people are generally the same in terms of how much they believe and how much they doubt themselves. And ultimately, and this is from like, all the psychologists that we've spoke to that have worked with MLB athletes, NBA athletes, NFL, whatever it is, highest level athletes, is there's always the self-doubt, but they're just better at managing the self-doubt and just trying to execute on whatever they've trained and whatever they've practiced. And ultimately, if you've practiced more and more things are automatic to you, then you're going to be more successful when adversity strikes, right? Because that's going to be people's undoing, is not having practice for when adversity strikes.
Yeah.
Obviously, the most common one that I can think of being like MMA, right? That's like the highest risk of adversity, right? If you have practiced so much stuff and then next thing you know, you blacked out and your feet don't work. Like how well you've practiced getting out of danger is almost like part of that whole process. I think it was GSP came on recently on Joe Rogan's podcast, and they had a long chat about George's preparation for a fight, and he basically said that every single thing I do, I drill it to the point where it's automatic. He's like, I don't want anything when I'm out there in the fight for me to have to think about. I just want to react to whatever is out there.
Yeah.
And he goes, it's like being a computer. It's like, obviously he's simplifying it a little bit, but press the button and combination happens.
Yeah.
Press this button, combination happens. He goes, the second I have to think about it is the second that I'll usually lose. And so I feel like that's almost a principle you can apply to any sport, is practice to the point that it just becomes so automatic. Like when 3, 2, 1 go happens, you just go. Like you just know what the rowing pace is. You know what double unders are like. You shouldn't really be thinking about it. You should just be going.
Yeah. I mean, in theory, that'd be great if you could do that. I mean, I think that especially in CrossFit, that's hard to do, because in order to practice, you need a super high level of resilience. I mean, your joints need to be able to tolerate the contractions. Your sensitivity to pain needs to be lessened. I mean, you're going to probably have some level of mechanical pain if you're at a competitive level in this sport somewhere at some point in your build up, and you need to be able to navigate that well. You need to also practice, I think, the competitive intensity, which is hard to replicate without people next to you in a competitive setting. So you need to be able to compete. Even Frazier, he went to regionals, I think, in his first year and didn't make it to the games, and then took second, and then won. So he still had 3 years of competitive experience before he actually broke through and became the Matt Frazier who's the dominant, even though it was pretty damn good when he took second. But it's, you still, I think, need some of that practice. And to be able to get that practice, you need to get to a certain level in training and then be able to do well enough at the open level and at the regional level and get there. So it's hard to try to listen to people that are the best in the world and try to create models for what does this mean for me and maximizing my potential, because he can be automatic at that level. But it's still good to I look at that for how do I coach Travis, how do I coach Noah, how do I coach people that want to be the best. But outside of that, I think my models are just different for people that aren't as gifted or who have injury history that can't take certain amounts of movements but still need to get better at them. And it just becomes more complex, I think, from as a coaching quest for people that aren't that 1.0001% of people that get there to the games.
I think what's interesting about the training think tank coaches is the athletic backgrounds of all the different coaches. We'll get to know some of them this week. So all very diverse, all very different. And I think that's amazing because you can bring so much different experience from so many different aspects of sport into our coaching model because it's all valuable.
Yeah.
Is that something that you planned on doing or planned on happening, or just played out that way? Because there's a lot of coaching organizations. They're all just ex-regionals athletes.
Yeah, no, I think it just. I mean, I wish I could take credit for that, but I think it was kind of just luck.
Right.
I am super grateful about that because one of the things I have a really hard time with in this sport or in this industry is that people who are experts, who are legitimate experts, like a running expert, for example, will get in and they'll start coaching a regional or games level athlete in running and then apply all of their models that they use for triathletes or they use for 5K run specialists or, road racing marathoners, and they apply them as if they're the same. And I found that just doesn't work from a long-term perspective. I mean, it might work on, certain people, or it might work on the people that have no running experience because they just need to start running because they're such beginners. Yeah. But the bodies are different, right? Like the hypertrophy in the upper body is different, which makes the run gait sequence a little bit different. The amount of bounce just in their legs, just from a tension perspective, because they're absorbing repeated double unders and box jumps and cleans and snatches and all of that stuff. It changes the protocols that I've found to be effective long term that also keep people's endocrine systems and minds and emotions motivated to get good at that thing. So it's been nice knowing that, okay, Evan was a really high level runner who has a ton of knowledge about the specific disciplines of running and can actually speak to the running culture and have respect from the running culture. But he's also coached in CrossFit for a really long time and done CrossFit. So I know that the protocols and the research that he's done has been on CrossFitters for CrossFitters. So the application to this market is something I can trust more. Same thing with Kyle. He started swimming after his post-collegiate swimming career, and he's like, oh my God, it's so much different. I'm so much thicker, I sink. So we had to create different protocols for getting these guys with these huge quads, and they have different builds than good swimmers, right? They don't have super long wingspans that wouldn't be really good for chest to bars, and it's just not helpful. So creating different protocols that are more effective in swimming from Kyle has just been super effective. And Brandon, having him involved in speed and change of direction allows me to be able to pull from my own resources as opposed to having to hire a million other different consultants to try to help me create a training structure for somebody to try to get good at everything. And we all can research the problem from a little bit of a different vantage point. So it's I think it was just luck, but it ended up being a really lucky really lucky situation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you still had to hire them, so I guess you created your own luck. So we spoke to Evan, and he mentioned that he did this we got kind of lost a little bit as he was talking, but ultimately what I think he was saying was that he was doing a 500 meter row thing, and he was testing basically the stress of his body, and he was basically doing the entire training for this 500 meter row based off auto-regulation.
Yep.
And that was a really interesting experiment to him.
But wasn't he regulating not just by how he felt, but his blood?
The Moxie thing. He had a laptop set up anyway, and he almost broke the world record. It was awesome. And it made me think, have you done anything personally with your own training? Because I think last time we spoke, you were just trying to get in and hit it hard with the guys and throw it down when you can. But have you done any recent experiments that you've used and applied to any coaching models?
So I think most of my experiments, and it might be a function of me building the movement course, or it might be a function of just me trying to take my own training really seriously again, have all really been movement focused. And maybe that concept just gets lost in either esoteric thought or in the PT world where it's very biomechanical. But for me, movement was a function of how do I get my body to move and navigate some of the old injuries I had. I had knee surgery, I broke my ankle, I tore my labrum in my hip, I had shoulder surgery, I broke my wrist, and all of those things over time, they create changes, structural changes in terms of how you move. So as a, somebody that doesn't have 8 hours a day to train, how do I create some sort of a structure around being able to move well? And what's my definition of movement? Like, do I want to be flexible and low muscle mass? Do I want to be explosive again? Do I want to be able to change direction? Do I want to be enduring in these patterns? Do I want to be able to do high level gymnastic skills? And I think for me, a lot of it was, I want to do all of that stuff. Like, I want to be able to do whatever I want. I want to be physically capable. I still want to be really strong. I still want to be able to throw. I still want to be able to go and grapple if I want to grapple. I want to be able to get on a wrestling mat and not be worried about if I hit a penetration step, my knee is sore for 2 weeks because it's just unstable. And I think creating protocols for how the body moves, how to breathe under tension, how to think about the body from a movement context, but not like the movement culture where I'm trying to dance and just be kind of good at anything, but where I have these guided forward directives that I want to go to, where I'm not moving for the sake of moving, but I have a purpose. How do I think about training in a context of getting better at that? So I have a lot of gymnastics protocols that I've been working on, and my body weight's like 225 right now, and I've been able to get a back lever. I've been working on I can do a bent arm planche on parallettes, and I've been working on, I have a bet with a lot of the people to do a mana. I don't know if that'll ever be possible. But.
Yeah, we had that. We actually said we're throwing $1,000 as well. So
I'm
if you do it on the podcast today.
Yeah, I'm not even close. Yeah.
You'd have to be the biggest person to ever do a mana.
Yeah, there's a dude in the movement culture, I think he was like 200 pounds that I've seen do one.
Roy Gold?
Yeah.
He's a big dude.
Yeah, and he's really impressive because he's long too.
Yeah, he's an ex-swimmer.
Yeah. And I mean, I have found that my numbers in terms of like sports performance are lower than when I was in my 20s, which is probably,
That's weird.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably normal, especially the amount I work. But my body is able to do things that it wasn't able to do even when I was in the prime of my athletic career. And I'm able to get into like positions that I didn't even think were possible. I'm able to do like really easy pistols on my right leg, which I didn't think was ever going to be a possibility. And taking those protocols in terms of how to like reset the stretch reflex, how to do daily movement maintenance in a timely manner, because I think a lot of people's movement protocols are costly because they're reliant on the outside world, PTs, chiros, manual therapists, massage, whatever people are doing, which can be, a couple $100 a month. And then it's also super time consuming because I think most people only know like stretching, band distracted stretching or foam rolling, which is like a lot of time, and it doesn't really yield results from a long-term perspective from what I've seen for most people. It's like, hey, you put your arm in a band, you get into external rotation, you go back. How long have you been doing that? 3 years. All right. From like after the initial month, how much structural change have you seen in your actual overhead position when you're not in this banded position, when you're actually trying to snatch or when you're actually trying to go into a bar muscle up or whatever? And for most people, their movement quality is not changing over time. If anything, it's regressing. They're getting more hypertrophied, more bound down. And while their performance metrics and like one or two little things are getting better, their overall like quality of movement and really life at some ways is deteriorating. Like I know for years, like I would get out of bed in the morning and I wouldn't be able to fully stand up because I had so much back pain for like an hour. And I would take like a 20 or 30 minute really long shower to kind of get loose and make sure I was able to move. That's not an issue anymore. So like a lot of those things, I think for me, I started exploring because I was fucking sick of it. I was just sick of like the pain and not being able to do what I wanted physically. And then I started realizing like, oh, I can potentially use this stuff to increase longevity of the athletes and improve their gymnastics ability, improve their Olympic lifting ability, improve their awareness in a Metcon setting of knowing like, okay, I'm doing thrusters and I'm at max effort. Oh my God, I'm holding my breath. And like, even just having the awareness that you are holding your breath or that you are hyperventilating can push fatigue out so much longer, because I don't think most people are aware of it. They're just like, they're so into the race and so into the moment that they're not in touch with their like their body as a movement entity or whatever you'd call it. So I think that is where my major focus from a training perspective has been for years, really, for like probably 3 to 5 years. And it's allowed me to get back into doing Metcons with everybody and snatching and doing bar muscle ups and doing stuff that like I used to be like, well, I never need to do that ever again in my life. Like that's just, it's not helpful. Big people don't need to do that.
Yeah.
And then I was just like, well, that's also a cop out. Like I don't want to be a coach who's like, you know, rolling around in a wheelchair eating Twinkies.
Drinking Monster Energy drinks and shit. Yeah. So have you seen the movement work that you've been doing work in a very short period of time? I mean, you didn't actually mention the length of your sessions, but how long would a session go for?
Do you mean time, like the amount of time I've committed?
Yeah, well, like how long is a week
session?
of training? Like how many hours are you investing into it?
It changes. I mean, I'd be lying to say that I have enough structure like my athletes do. I mean, my own personal training is definitely, it's a priority, and my health is a priority, but I think a bigger priority for me is making sure that my athletes are prepared for their competitions, making sure that my business is doing well. So I make sure I prioritize some training every day or some movement work every day, but I don't sit down and write a training template for myself anymore because I don't have really concrete, like I need to get better at this, this, and this. I make sure I run once a week. I make sure I do gymnastics once a week. I make sure I do breathing work every day, not like hard breathing, but some sort of either positional breathing, endurance work, meditative breathing, something. I try to get my balance over the course of a week. And that way, if I come in and I'm tired or I had a bunch of work the day before, I'm not super stressed out about missing it. I do have one of my actual concrete goals is to PR all of my strength lifts again one more time. So I've been working a lot on my deadlift mechanics and being able to get into the bottom position. The labrum that I tore, I had really bad FAI for years. So like
what's FAI?
Femoral acetabular impingement. It's just like that pinchy sensation that people get on the front of their hip. So if I get down into the deep bottom of a snatch or deep bottom of a clean, no problem. But for whatever reason, when I hinged, my right leg it would be so painful in that bottom position. So I think I would just, when I was deadlifting heavy, because back in the day I just didn't give a shit. I was like, oh, pain, whatever. Just, you know, it's just pain.
Part of it.
Yeah. So I would really dynamically get into the bottom and just rip the bar off the floor and get out of that position as fast as possible. And I fucked my back up so many times like that. I mean, I got pretty strong. I mean, it's at 215 body weight. I deadlifted like 535, which is like okay. But I would just be crippled from it. So now I've just been working on being able to get down in there without feeling the pinch and being able to deadlift with an actual brace in the bottom. So I do put a lot of work in just with the empty barbell, just working on my snatch positions and getting in the bottom. And I do almost all of my training in barefoot shoes. So learning how to snatch with barefoot shoes took a really long time just to have the foot strength to be able to hit the bottom and just be like stiff in the floor. You don't realize how much stability, or maybe you do realize how much stability the lifting shoes give you.
Yeah,
you take those out and have to redevelop your patterns that, you know, I learned how to snatch pretty quickly and I just like always threw my shoes on and snatched. And then when I took that away, I was like, holy shit, man, it's a completely different movement. Like just that 1 inch of lift made it so that my body had to get into a much less challenging position. Taking that away took me almost a year and a half just to be able to like snatch relatively heavy again.
Yeah. I think of the lifting shoe, or I get people to think of the lifting shoe like how they think of an injury. So like how a lifting shoe can have such a flow, like such a small thing can have such a flow-on effect to the bottom of a clean, to a snatch, to whatever it might be, a double kettlebell overhead squat. Think of that as like if you busted your ankle playing, you know, footy 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and you did so much structural damage that, you know, you basically you've got 15, 20 degrees, maybe something you wouldn't know, but if you tested it with a chiropractor, you'd know how much of a flow-on effect that's going to have to the rest of your body. Yeah. Like those things, if you're not addressing them, will make a big difference. I was going to ask about, I think, what I'm personally curious about is how you would make progress towards, well, let's go strength lifts, but a manner in 3 years. How
the mana might be a little
Yeah, yeah.
ridiculous because it might be impossible. But
how would you make progress outside of the training? Because I do a session, Carl programs, whatever it might be. I'm like, awesome, that was a good training session. Now go sit down for 8 hours and do this.
Yeah.
And it's like, how can I? That I feel is almost undoing the training, or is it worse to go do a heavy deadlift and then sit on your spine for 8 hours?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me at least, it's been a lot about awareness because, like, sitting, for example, gets vilified, right? You sit down like this, your posture is going to get ruined. But for me, what I've found is if you do enough movement work throughout the day and you're aware and you're not sitting still, then you're not going to create these degenerative patterns that are unwindable. Being able to have an environment where you work, where you can do some work while you're sitting on the floor in different sitting postures and can get comfortable in those positions to actually work. I think most people only have 2 or 3 positions they can get into that they're comfortable in. So they sit down like this and type, or they sit down like this and type. And if you only have 2 positions to be in and you're sitting there for hours at a time without like rules that you can enforce on yourself, like, okay, if I know for my mana, there's my mana. Yeah, I know that
My future mana. Yeah.
my potential mana. If I know that compression ability, being able to pull my hips into maximal level of flexion while also getting lumbar flexion and pelvic posterior tilt at a maximal level while maintaining thoracic extension with my arms in extension, I'll sit down at my desk sometimes and I'll just like
Sit in the manner.
blow all my air out and get into flexion and then pull my thoracic spine into extension, put my arms behind my back, hold it for 3 or 4 seconds, and then go back to work. Like little things like that. I know it sounds insane, and I don't anticipate that building a mana, but I do think
How'd you get the mana?
like for somebody that sits down and programs but also wants to be a competitive CrossFitter, if your arms are down here all the time, but you need to be good at gymnastics and you need to have your arms over your head, being aware.
Bluetooth keyboard.
Yeah, working like that. But just being aware throughout the day, like, set a timer and every 15 minutes, put your arms over your head and do some positional breathing work or get up and kick yourself into a handstand. It doesn't really take that much work. It just takes that much awareness and focus and attention and planning to understand what are the components of movement that I need for my sport or for my training goals, and then what are my patterns of behavior outside of training that are potentially unwinding them, and how do I minimize that damage. And I don't think people think about that. They just think about training, and then they're not conscious of their movement when they're just doing day-to-day things. If they're bending over and picking shit up, or they're overly conscious, like they go down to pick something up off the floor and they're like, I gotta be in my deadlift posture to pick this up. And I'm like, you'll make yourself non-resilient over time like that because you only have one pattern of expression for bending over, and movement variability is, I think, way more important for long-term movement potential. So I think really it's awareness. It's an understanding of how the body works, what you need to do for your sport, and that, I guess, that humbling process of figuring out what you need to learn and what you need to get better at will allow people over time to figure out how to organize their day-to-day in a way that makes them more likely to succeed.
Yeah, Carl read a book, I think you guys all read it. It was like The Gift of Injury that came up a few times, and one of the things that he talked about was for a while, Carl was really into getting me to like learn how to segment each piece of my spine. And then he read that book. He's like, stop. Except the lower back, because you need it for strength. What are you guys still on that at the moment in terms of not wanting to be able to move too much through some ranges of motion because you need some inherent stiffness to lift heavy bars?
I mean, look, I think I don't think there's any right way to move. I think that there is everything requires context. So if like you got really long limbs, you're not like super built to be load resistant, I'd say. Like you don't have a power lifter's frame.
No.
So if you want as part of your training to be able to lift heavy ass weights, then
having cut my limbs off.
Well, no, having a lot of spinal segmentation ability might make it harder to create your brace, and it might not put your your structure in an optimal position to be able to do that. It might not give you you might not even get neural access if you're that. Like, one of the things I found over time is when I put a lot of emphasis on like yoga or flexibility, I'd come into the gym and I'd just feel loose and weak. And I think over time you realize like the pattern generator, your central nervous system, whatever it is that controls your ability to express power and motion, will be, it has sensory input that it gets from you. So it gets from your joints, it gets from an understanding like you have too much motion in this area to be able to send a signal this much power and be able to protect your spine. So it basically shuts your own ability to go get after it down. And I don't think it's like that simple. It's just the best way I can kind of create a metaphor for explaining it. If that is the case, then for you, doing a lot of spinal segmental motion is probably not good. Now, if you want to go back and do jits and you want to be able to like get on your back, contort, lift, shrimp, move your spine, then having an immobile spine is going to make you a really fucking shitty jits practitioner. So it requires context. Now, if you want to do both, now it's like you better really fucking understand movement well, and you better be aware of the context of how you need to move in each one of those scenarios, because if you got a lot of motion in your spine because you put a lot of time into it while doing jiu-jitsu, and then you're not aware of how to create and contract a maximal effort of brace to stop that motion from occurring when you're deadlifting, then you're probably going to be more likely to hurt your back. And I think that is the problem that all CrossFitters are in, that they need to be good at everything. Like, you want to get good at toes to bar. If you tell me that they're going to be able to maintain perfect spine stiffness and only get hip flexion and go to the bar and not get any pelvic tucking under to be able to get the compression to go to a toes to bar under maximal levels of fatigue, you're crazy, or you've never done CrossFit. So knowing that even just like that one movement and deadlifting, or that one movement and snatching, says, okay, well, now your spine needs to have the movement capabilities to do two entirely different things. And if somebody doesn't understand how their body moves, how to create their brace when they're at risk, and they don't do mindful practice of trying to figure out how do I breathe in these positions while bracing, while being under tension, they're going to make themselves less resilient. And in a short term, that might not make them a better athlete, but in the long term, it's going to make them more injury prone, which means they'll train less, which means they'll not really do the sport more, which means they'll eventually weed themselves out of it. So I think that an awareness of movement is probably equally as important as an awareness of nutrition, as an awareness of strength, as awareness of energy systems. And it's one of the reasons why not only personally do I dedicate to understanding it myself, but just like why it has been such a big investment to try to create a course that teaches like everything about it, from everybody that I've learned, from the chiros, from PTs, from FRC, from Gray Cook, from Gary Gray. Like, what are they teaching that is valuable, and how do I create a model that not just applies to CrossFit, but applies to, I want my body to be capable to do all of this shit, to be strong, to be fast, to be able to change directions, to be flexible, to be able to increase tension, lower tension, breathe under no tension, be able to move under the water. And that for me has been like my passion project in my own training, which is good. It's been something that's been enjoyable, because I know a lot of my past training quests felt laborious. It felt like I was, like grinding all the time.
Right.
Now I feel like I actually kind of enjoy the process of learning and feeling like more of a beginner.
I think it just gives you more options to do what your body is asking for a bit more, rather than forcing it a lot more.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the people we've got on recently, Raf, I feel like they've spoken about whatever they're teaching people, or whatever their expertise is, in the context of the human race and what we were actually designed and put on here to do, right? And if you're going to do something very, very specific, we weren't really meant to squat 1,000 pounds, right? So what is the context of our body? And it almost makes you think as well, like, what were we designed to do? We probably weren't designed to hit that really high-end lactic threshold pain zone 6 days a week, because it just doesn't make sense, right? It's probably going to do more harm than good. My question is, where does conditioning fit into that? Because when I think about conditioning, I think it in the context of what you need is, plains of Africa sort of thing. Probably once in a blue moon, you need to be able to sprint really hard and fast, and then majority of the time, you need to be able to walk for 20, 30 kilometers a day.
Yeah, I mean, it's just always a hard argument for me because I feel like the human species is adaptable.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like, evolution is one of the primary things that, that is the bedrock for a lot of people's movement quests. Like, even in our course, we have, like, there are people out there like Philip Beach that talk about how ground-based movement and resting postures on the floor, and Ido Portal with the squat challenge, and being able to get into these resting postures is one of the things that allowed us to move well over time, and why these indigenous cultures move well into their 40s and 50s. And I think that's true, but I think that we have the ability as a species to adapt to our environment, and our environment has changed over time. And so while back in the day, hunting and running around and grabbing berries was our way of getting food, in our new environment, squatting 1,000 pounds could potentially be a form of hunting to be able to acquire money, to be able to acquire your food. And so as a survival mechanism, it does potentially make it so that you might need to do those things. But that is really up to each individual in terms of what they want to do. Now, giving away, in the pursuit of those specializations, giving away some of the, I guess, universally human movement style things, like getting up from the ground, getting down to the ground, having the ability to squat, having single leg balance, having an appropriate gait so you could walk or jog or change directions. I don't personally think that it's worth doing that, because I've seen a lot of my friends, a lot of my colleagues, what they look like over time in their 40s and 50s when they move, knowing that they had these heydays when they were young, that were high-level athletes, just doesn't seem like it's worth it from a long-term perspective. So I think that for me, if I could contribute to the athletic population that I coach, it would be, how do I attain both of those things? And when I am aware that there is a level of specialization that's going to come that is going to degrade some of those, I guess, things that I would consider universally human movement needs, I tell them. I'm like, well, it's probably not a good thing that you're losing this, but as long as it's short term, and then once you're done, we go back to kind of prioritize that. I don't think there's really any of a problem with that. And I kind of have a bone to pick, or I just get frustrated when there's people out there that are like, why would you do that type of thing? Why would you do this? I'm like, well, if somebody has a gift, and we as a society put sport up on a major culture where you could be a millionaire, or you can be able to get glory, and you can have a time where you can shine and get your ideas out there and be part of a community, like, it gives meaning to people's lives. That's why, it just might not be what that person wants to do, but I feel like, I guess my obligation or my role is to try to figure out, how do I do it in a way that we're not going to degrade their quality of life forever in the pursuit of this one little thing. So yeah, I don't know if that just fucking went on a tangent.
I just blacked out. Yeah. I just blacked out and went.
I don't know what I said.
No, I think I think when you program properly, ultimately you move more towards what you were just saying. Is like, in the long run, people won't be as messed up. Inherently, there's always some degree you're going to have to hurt yourself a lot. You can't go to the CrossFit Games and be like, well, I'm not going to do this workout because it goes over my maximum volume that I can handle. But
I'm only going long walks.
Yeah, yeah. But that's part of it.
The truth is, everybody gets hurt. Like, I hate the whole, like, the pain-free training model. Like, oh, you can, like, the only way you can kind of guarantee that you're going to be pain-free in all of your existence of training is doing really low-stress training that doesn't simulate adaptation, which means eventually you're going to be weak, deconditioned, and not really strong and mobile in a lot of positions. Yeah. But if you do that for a really long period of time, at some point you're going to destimulate yourself to the point that you're not strong enough to just do daily tasks within your life. Like, you go to the grocery store and they put 50 pounds in a bag and you got to pick it up in one hand. Maybe not 50 pounds, whatever, however many pounds in a bag.
It's a fucking mean grocery bag. For Whole Foods, that's like $600 worth of stuff.
That's 40 turkeys in one bag.
So it's 600 natural deodorants from Whole Foods. It's just how many protein bars we pick up for the plane. We're just like, okay. Yeah. Raf goes, he puts them all on the slidey thing.
This is a true story last night.
He goes, how much do you reckon, like, how much money? I go, $100. And I was like, no way. $100.03.
Oh my god!
Just looking at the pile of
In
protein bars.
That's
Yeah.
a pretty good guess.
Yeah.
It
Well, could be a hungry plane ride.
You know what I was thinking though when you were saying like, oh, you got to fix it after?
Yeah.
It does seem like to me that pretty much no one does that because you do some sort of athletic event and then you're done.
Yeah.
Like if you retire, I don't know anyone that goes back and gets their coach again. It's like, cool, like I've retired.
Yeah.
Now I want to undo everything. I
Yeah.
would imagine you just retire and then just
I think
zero.
a lot of people they take their mentality and they just change it, and they're like, oh, now I want to be, I want to be lean, or I want to look good, or now I want to go and do triathlons, and so they go from whatever self-organization they had. Like I take my body and I get it really stiff in this squat pattern, this bench pattern, and this deadlift pattern, deadlifting or doing powerlifting. And so the body organizes to do that. It gets a lot of systemic tension. It gets really tight. It gets, respiratory system in terms of endurance and capability to sustain long-term breathing drops, like all the adaptations that you get from being an elite powerlifter. And then somebody says, oh, that's really unhealthy for you. You got, you're going to have blood pressure issues. Like, your CO2 levels are all fucked up. Like, you need to fix all of this stuff. And so they deviate that mentality that they had where they went all in on that self-organization on these three things to some other thing, as opposed to thinking of like, well, what are for me, what I want to do in my life now and long-term, what are my human movement needs and what do I want to maintain? And then how do I specialize within that kind of subset umbrella, knowing that it's going to kind of be like a dialing system. Like I know strength and endurance aren't like so tightly coupled that a 5-pound increase in your back squat is going to decrease your ability to run a 5K, but there's some, right? Like, you deadlift 1,000 pounds, you're probably not running a 14-minute 5K. Like, and if you run a 14-minute 5K, you're probably not deadlifting 1,000 pounds. There's going to be some give and take there. So as you kind of look at whatever your needs are in terms of like, how do you want to move around in the world? Like, stressful shit happens in your life. If I said like, something really fucked up, like, oh my God, dog just got hit by a car outside and you really like dogs, like that's going to create an actual physiological response in your system, elevated heart rate, like, you're going to get tense. And I think for me, training a lot of times in terms of like movement, breathing, meditation, all of this stuff, it's my way of trying to figure out how do I cope with the outside world that is fucking chaotic. Like my training is a time I can kind of put constraints on, on what I'm doing, but being resilient and being able to move in the way that I want to move allows me to kind of navigate life better, go to, competitions where I have to be on my feet for 12 hours and walk from event to event, which is miles. And at some point that sounds silly to like, a 30-something-year-old dude who's running a business, but at some point, like in your 40s or in your 50s, that does become like exhausting to the point that it could become traumatic for people and then be the thing that takes them out of coaching. So for me, I'm like, well, I want to coach for a long period of time. So having that level of resilience that I can sit on bleachers for 5 hours and not have back pain is something that I want to be able to develop. So then why am I having back pain? What is it that's stiff? How can I manipulate my body? How can I change postures knowing that I have to sit like this because I got people next to me on both sides? How can I create a bunch of variability in this position that I don't tighten up and get stiff and hold my breath and be there and be like stressed out as shit's happening on the floor and holding my breath? And so I think that if people start thinking about organizing their systems as a human first, and then the specialization as like, how do you want to express yourself now, it won't be as much of a non-common experience for people to unwind the damage of their specialization, because they'll kind of always be on one quest. Like the one narrative that they'll have is themselves as a human body. You only get fucking one.
Yeah, I think that's the ultimate quest, is to start something and then along the way pick your specializations and do well in them. You don't have to be the best, but do well in them to the point where it's like, oh, I deadlifted that much, or I can do this handstand drill or whatever. And over time, I'd hope that most people would appreciate that more than something else. Yeah. Just look at a guy like, do you know John Call, Juji Mufu?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, that guy is super impressive. He can do enduring things. Like, one time he did 100 backflips in a row. I don't know, it took him 30-something minutes or whatever.
Jeez.
No, less. It took him like 15, 16 minutes. Like, 100 backflips, right? That's a lot of power endurance. And he can deadlift, 700 pounds. And he can do a triples twisting front flip or some shit like that. Like that is, for me, that's sort of, obviously there may be some other Mexican supplements at play and stuff, but regardless, he's kind of exploring all domains of fitness, or a lot.
And I think, for me at least, I don't know if this is for everyone, but I think the biggest mistake that I made is I didn't keep a lot of the adaptations that I worked for. And so now I'm like, man, I'm trying to claw my way back, whereas if I could have just kept some of this, I was not really fast, like relative to Usain Bolt, but I was really fast when I was, playing college football, and like I could jump pretty fucking high. And then like, you stop doing that and you start squatting and doing a bunch of like double unders and low tension jumping, and then all of a sudden you test your vert and you're like, I can barely get off the floor anymore. So it was, I think, a matter of figuring out over time, like, how do I create and construct a training protocol that allows me to keep at least as much of the adaptation as I can. Some of it's going to degrade as you get older and as you kind of move on and as you dedicate less time to it. But I would like to, for me, like all the things that I've invested in, like running, sprinting, change of direction, grappling, martial arts, that type of stuff, CrossFit, running, swimming. I'd like to be able to keep all of those adaptations as I go towards getting advanced gymnastic skills. And that way, when I'm in my 40s and my 50s, if I'm lucky enough to stay healthy, I mean, you never know, but if I'm lucky enough to stay healthy, that I can still do all of those things at a relatively high level, not relative to 20-year-olds, but relative to my demographic of people, relative to the people that are in my kind of subset of, age, background, experience type thing.
Yeah, those people that have done that extremely well, for whatever reason, maybe because there's no social media back in for them and all that, you don't see a lot of them, but every now and then you'll see the guy who's 75, 80 that, chose to only eat whole foods, didn't want processed foods, and like did gymnastics as a kid and kept it up and now does running and stuff. And you see them and you see, oh, that is what life can be like if I maintain a level of discipline that, for my physical health. And it's amazing. Like they can squat, they can jump, they can run, they look healthy, their skin looks good.
Yeah. I think people forget, at least for me, when I look around, I think one of the, obviously, like some things that are kind of maybe lucky genetic, like skin, body composition, like they play a role in how people...
Black don't crack. That's what Chris said.
They play a role in how old people look over time. But I don't think anything makes people look older than moving poorly. Like when I had back injuries, I felt like I was walking like a 50-year-old man. Like you just like... and it's not offensive. I'm not trying to offend 50-year-olds. I know some 50-year-olds move well, but it just, that can create such a horrible outward appearance as a result of something that's much more in your control than aesthetics. I mean, aesthetics, body composition, body fat, muscularity, you can probably control to some degree, but there's going to be some level of degeneration on that front, which is why like TRT and test and all that stuff so popular for people when you get into that age. But movement is something that you can kind of just do. Like you don't need any, you don't need any fancy things to be able to work on that. You don't need any, fancy things to work on your breathing and understand how to get into different positions and breathe, and how to be able to manipulate your kind of excitement level, nervous system state, whatever you call it, with your breathing, and having an awareness of all of that stuff. I think over time, I mean, like obviously I need to live longer to know this for sure, but I think it's going to pay dividends in terms of how your ability to just enjoy life and enjoy moving and go on vacations and, be able to try out new skills. And like we were talking about going surfing, I know there's people that get to a certain level where they're like, they don't even have the physical capability to even think about that being an option. They go on vacation and go to a beach type area, and they don't have the fitness or ability to even try. And I'm like, who would want to be in that? No matter how good you look, you're jacked, you got big arms, you look great, and you don't have the fitness to do something like that. I mean, to me, that sounds like something I don't want to experience. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw it, but Brute Strength did like a video series of... They paired like Hepner versus like bodybuilder versus like powerlifter and weightlifter, and even just on all the different tasks, you can see the restrictions that bodybuilding and powerlifting just have on your movement. To come back to what you're saying, as cool as they were excelling at the flex off and the max deadlift, ultimately when you see I can't remember what the Colombian, is he Colombian? the weightlifter's name is. Anyway, he's like the bronze medalist or something from the Olympics.
fastest guy on Instagram.
He just moves, like you watch him move and you just want to hit replay over and over and over again on whatever he does, because he's just, because of the specific skill that he's gone after requires a good level of movement. And I think that is, later in life, he'll be better off than someone that went down the path of bodybuilding or weightlifting too heavily.
Yeah. And I think maybe there might be a new kind of wave of people that might get into bodybuilding, and instead of just thinking about it as an aesthetic quest, will also think about their movement capabilities. Because I'd be lying if I didn't think that like we have a category in my training model for movement of end range isometrics, and like Andrea Ospina has end range liftoffs and all this stuff where they do short range contractions. Short range contractions is almost the same exact thing as bodybuilding posing. Like if people are getting into a bicep flex and getting into a short range and flexing the muscle belly as hard as they can to try to shorten it up, how is that any different than trying to do an end range isometric contraction on your bicep? Like it's maybe not the same exact thing because you have a different intention in terms of what it's supposed to do for you, but it's very similar. So I think that you can have the capability. Now I think the size of the muscle bellies and the girth and where you distribute them, if you want to look symmetrical relative to what the judging standards are in the sport, might make you move a little strange for like athletic quests, but at least people can, again, know what sacrifices they're making to their movement in the pursuit of that specialization, and then unwind them when they're done with getting on stage. I don't think there has been a movement there. I know Dorian Yates now is doing a ton of yoga and a ton of cycling.
Different cycling?
What?
Yeah, different
Cycling with wheels, not pills.
Oh, yeah. Cycling with wheels.
Probably still both.
Yeah.
I think he's done enough of that.
Yeah.
He's pretty into ayahuasca now.
Yeah.
I do think the old style bodybuilders actually did do that though. Like if you look at the old ones, they used to they used to do like a little routine.
Yeah.
Like they just splits, and I think they used to also, like Arnold did weightlifting on like the same week he would pose as well.
Oh, really?
Like you would lift and you would pose like in a double competition.
They definitely, if you just look at old school bodybuilders, even like the way that they moved on stage, and Kai Green I know has now, he like does some pretty fucking crazy shit in his pose routines and moves pretty well for he's got to be 300 pounds.
He's a monster.
He is enormous, but he still's got pretty crazy level of movement expression at that level of muscularity. So I know that it's possible, but just having that level of size is going to impact it in some ways, and I'm sure at some age, like maintaining that much muscle mass is going to be impossible. Just the stress on the gut and stress of the heart to be able to pump against that much tissue is probably just going to, he'll just go down in size, but maybe his movement quality when he loses 50, 60 pounds of muscle will be great. And you're like, oh, well, this is the model for, for how to move, and maybe not without drugs, but yeah.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy. There's that whole movement Generation Iron is what they call it, this interesting movie, but I don't.
I saw that.
Yeah, the second one?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It was Pumping Iron 2.
Sort of, yeah, no, so it was like Generation
right?
Iron 1 and then Generation Iron 2.
Oh, no, I didn't see this.
Yeah. But it's still an interesting culture. I think ultimately what they're getting at is like the whole field of how fitness is become a business, how fitness is monetized, has completely changed. For better or worse, I guess that's up to people to decide for themselves. But yeah, how an athlete made money and that sort of thing is different now. It's actually, I did want to ask you about this with Noah coming into not live with you, but be in Atlanta, Georgia, or Alpharetta. How you've seen him, a little different to Travis, like less business responsibilities, right? But, be able to support himself full time through a channel like Instagram, that sort of thing. Yeah. So how have you seen that as from a coach's perspective, basically give an athlete complete freedom over their schedule?
I'm confused.
Have you seen it's a really good thing? It's a bad thing because he has to spend so much time on his phone or that sort of thing?
Got it. Yeah, I do think I see a lot of people that spend way too much time on social media. And I don't mean it from like a judgmental perspective, but I just mean they're not productive. If you're like doing a bunch of stuff and super successful in your training and, super successful financially, and then you spend 5 hours a day scrolling through Instagram and stuff like that, then I think that's great. But I don't see many people doing that.
If any, yeah.
Yeah. But if the way I look at Noah specifically is he's earned the platform for that to be his profession. So when I look at him on his phone, even if I'm like just naturally I have this instinct in my head to be like, no, that's not good. Like, especially if it happens around training, it's his job. If he came into me and was like, dude, you're writing programs too frequently, I'm like, well, this is how I get paid. Like, This is how I pay my bills. This is what I do. This is part of my day to day. I have to integrate this into my life. So when I look at him doing that, I think he's got pretty good balance. Like, he's not, as much as he does create content and post stuff out there, I haven't seen, while he's here, it impact his investment in his day-to-day training. I have seen people that maybe I'm being judgmental, but I go to competitions and they're like in the middle of competitions, like talking to their phones and and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, focus on, you're at a competition. Like, is that beneficial for you to be doing all of that other stuff? Is that just part of your day-to-day routine? And then you see them not perform well and you're like, man, I can't help but think that that's a problem, and it's detracting from what you need to be doing on a day-to-day basis. So for him, watching him do it, knowing that most of it's happening pre-planned, he's doing his editing when he's at home, when he's doing his mobility work, he's focused on his day-to-day training. Now, every once in a while, he's like, he'll be building up in a snatch and get his phone, and I'll like shake my head and be like, can we just focus and hit the lift type thing? But I also know if I need to create an organization that creates professional athletes, that there has to be in our current culture some level of acceptance for that type of stuff, because it is a way that they get paid to do what they do. So there has to be some of it. So I think more than anything, I've been learning from him and understanding like, oh, okay, this is how people have to make their living in this specific sport, because it's different. Like, a Major League Baseball player doesn't need to be thinking about posting his Instagram stuff to pay his bills, because his contract is big enough to be on the court or whatever, on the field. But in CrossFit, the sport I don't think has evolved to that level where people are just compensated to compete. There's very few that actually are. So part of them is being kind of a social media celebrity style persona type thing. So I've been observing how do you create that balance? How do you not let that take away from your ability to be disciplined, focused, pay attention to your moving, breathing, warm-ups, cool downs, nutrition, and if it doesn't get in the way and it only, gives somebody something else to focus on so they're not constantly consumed with their training, then maybe it can be a performance enhancer. But I feel like you need to earn your right to get to that level.
I
when
agree.
people are like, finishing 500th in the open and not making it to regionals, and they're, they have these huge social media followings that they're trying to build without actually having something that they're good
And
at.
substance, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe I just am judgmental when I look at that and think, like, get good at something first.
Yeah.
Unless you're trying to get good at content creation, but then don't be promoting that you're an athlete. Like, you're trying to get good at content creation, not being an athlete. If you're creating content around your athletic career after you've already became a professional athlete, maybe I'm just a little bit more patient, biased to think that that's more acceptable.
Yeah, no, I think that's good advice. Would you want to, in the future, have something where you can offer professional CrossFit athletes an opportunity to train with you and have the basic stuff paid for, to be able to, is that a direction you want to push the organization to be like, okay, we're looking for like 4 athletes for this season?
Yeah. I paid for a condo with that in mind, that I was going to house athletes for a while. I don't know if the sport's there yet. Like, I feel like in order to do that, that would basically be like a developmental group, because I think you'd need to take somebody that was pretty good and invest like 3 or 4 years in them to get them to, like, a breakout visibility level.
Right.
Unless I were just trying to house like 50 of them and then play the numbers game, but that would cost so much money. So I think right now the market, the landscape for where the sport is set up just wouldn't allow that unless I were doing something with it, unless it was like a marketing TV show where it was like, building an athlete.
Yeah.
But I don't perceive that that's possible yet. I hope that it goes there, and I would love to have a training compound where I could house and feed people and have them fully focused on training and developing, like an IMG academy or something like that. I mean, that happens in every sport. Like there's fight camps, there's, football combine preparation camps. Like that's just something that I've always dreamed to do. I love people that are passionately questing to be the best at something, not just because I enjoy the process myself, but I think it just makes me better. It continues to make me invest in my own training, which is something that I know I'm going to need the motivation for over time. I need to keep myself engaged in it. So I'd love to do that, but I don't know if it's there yet.
Yeah, something's seriously gone wrong because the condo has us in it now. And Chris.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah. Or seriously gone right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a media condo. Yeah. The difficult part I would see is that, and we were talking about this earlier, is that the money, because the CrossFit Games loses so much money for the organization, it would almost have to take on some kind of investor to pump so much money into it and not worry about the fact that it's going to lose money, because ultimately it is a big thing or a big media piece that brings in the public to the training program.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
until that happens, I feel we're not going to be able to have super camps and stuff like that. I know some people are trying to get it in the Olympics and stuff like that, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know the finances of throwing a competition and what their business model looks like inside of CrossFit. I'm not integrated enough into to know what the inner workings of the sport are at that level. But I imagine from seeing, Tough Mudders and Spartan races and just seeing some of the figures that they post on on
participants,
financial journals and participants, and what triathlon has done from a money-making perspective, that if there's that much interest in the amount of people that want to compete in the Open and that sign up for the Open, and that want to be involved at the games level and that are at local competitions that are not sanctioned by CrossFit, but essentially is CrossFit competitions, that there is some way over time to create a less centralized, only CrossFit Games style model where it is a kind of global organization of competitions where maybe it's like the PGA Tour where there's series, or I have no idea what that looks like long term or what's possible, but I do know that this has the potential to be a relatively big sport in the future. I mean, I think endurance sports in general are really common, and this is a more interesting endurance sport than watching somebody run for 4 hours because they're racing in a fixed environment. So getting the digital infrastructure set up well so that when you're watching the competitions, who's in the lead, figuring out what the best way to display it is. I know for myself, when I watch online, it would be awesome to have a bird's eye view of all the racers at once, and then the main screen be the leaders or something like that. And I know that in PGA Tour, there's a lot of downtime in golf. There's however many minutes between the times they hit. So they run personal interest stories on the different people, and they do commentary on what the lead up was like. So I think that if the sport continues to grow at the level that it's grown over the past 10 years, that it'll be possible in the future. But I don't think that we could put the cart before the horse and think about that type of stuff now. Right now, I'm just focused on okay, what does the infrastructure allow me to do at and thrive now? And that's kind of what I put my time on. I'm already too much of a dreamer, and I already think too much about that type of shit. So if I do that, I'd just be lost in thought all day. So
yeah. All right, well, before we get into the last 4 questions, I wanted to ask one thing. Teams went to teams of 4 this year from just the same thing we were just riffing on just then. Do you think that was ultimately a better thing for the sport, or how it played out? Do you think it was better for 6 people?
What do you mean better for the sport? Viewership?
Yes, in terms of entertainment.
Yeah, I thought it was definitely a step in the right direction.
Yep.
6 on the floor is hard to see. I think you'd need a different floor and maybe different workout structures to house 6, which would then be silly because you'd have like an entirely different team setup than an individual setup, which might mean over time they would need to have them on different days. So in terms of making sure that the teams and the individuals can compete on the same floor in one weekend and make it visually appealing, I definitely think it was a step in the right direction. I also think that I don't know what Castro is deciding to do. I don't ever try to predict that anymore because I feel like one of his goals is to be non-predictable, which means that once you start creating predictions and publicizing them, then he'll be aware of them and make sure that doesn't come true. So, but I think it gives you the option of doing more creative things, like having 4 individuals do an individual Metcon that's around 8 minutes long is a 32-minute workout, which is more reasonable than having 6 people do it, which then turns it into a 48-minute workout, which then means 4 heats, and that's like potentially 3.5 hours of time that's wasted on one workout. So I think it gives you the ability to do individual style workouts. I like the idea that there can be more cohesion if there's only 4 people, because I know, like, you know, we built a team of 4 and they have the ability to work together so much more frequently when you're trying to work on there's only
the worm.
Yeah. And there's just less iterations of pairing 2s together. If you have 6 people, then this person can work with 5 other people to do, 5 other people to do a team of 2. And then you also have to work on team of 3. And then you also have to work on team of 4 with 2 people out. And that just makes it really hard to try to construct a training structure. So that, I think, makes the teams of 6 a little bit less polished. Now you see the teams that were good anyway being polished at the top, but in the initial heats of regionals, some of those teams of 6s just had like no communication ability, no synchro ability, because I just don't think they had the time to dedicate to it. But with 4 people, it's just easier to find 4 committed people, and the training time can be distributed amongst them to make sure that they have the ability to get in sync with one another better. So I loved it. I thought it was better.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that in the future, it lends itself for more opportunities to attract Rich Fronings, Kalipas, people who are done with the individual side of it, to still be excited about the team.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I'm not excited to watch Rich Froning amongst 5 other people.
Yeah.
But within his 4, when he's 25% of the team, it's a little bit more appealing. And even from their perspective, it's more appealing. I think at the Invitational, when they announced it or something, Castro went over to Thoris daughter and was like, "Oh, you said you would go team if it was 4. Like, here we go, it's 4. So what do you reckon?" She's like, not yet, but maybe.
And I think good too, because then it's easier to find 3 other good people than it is to find 5 other good people.
Yeah, of course.
Like they want to win. Like, they don't want to be on a team where they're like, oh, come on, go faster.
Yeah.
So
Froning came second. We saw his face on the podium. Dude was pissed. Yeah, he was pissed. Okay. All right. Well, you've had an opportunity to answer these 4 questions twice now.
Yeah, I took notes for this one.
Oh, perfect. Here we go. The only one who came prepared, and he was sick. That's good. Yeah, I'll tell you who was the least prepared.
Kyle?
Ooh, Noah.
Noah doesn't count. Yeah, he just shows up.
He saw the email. He's like, I should definitely open that email.
Did Kyle have good ones?
He was ready.
He was ready.
Did he have quotes from Viktor Frankl's
Man Search for Meaning? No, that was one of his books.
Oh, okay.
But what was his quote?
No, he loosely quoted the book.
He loosely quoted the book? Okay.
Oh, okay. Because I was thinking about using one of those, and I was like, I can't do that, because in the event that he did, I'm going to look like a copy.
As long as you don't say The Rock, then sweet. All right, so the first question. If you had an opportunity today to sit down and interview anyone that's alive, who would you choose and why?
Phil Knight.
Ooh.
That one took me a while these all took me a while to try to figure out. But the 2 questions I'd ask Phil Knight, he's the guy who created Nike. He seems to have access over the course of his life to a ton of different types of people, like billionaires and investors that want to be involved, athletes, marketing people, creatives, designers, just all types of different humans that he has the ability to connect with. And I'd want to know who added the most value to his life. Was it a combination of having the diversity of experience, or are there certain types of people that provided more value? Like, just to get insight into, I know how important it is who to spend time with in your life. And I know now I'm much more conscious of it because I realize that the way that I've invested myself into my business, I don't really have that much free time. And so my business is the time that I spend with people, and then my free time is I just want to kind of chill. Like I want to read, I want to be alone, I want to hang out with my dogs. Like I don't really want outside stimulation. So I'd want to kind of get insight into somebody who's lived their whole life and done a lot of things that exceed probably what I'll ever be able to dream to accomplish. Who added most value? And then the other thing is I read his book. There was which I was shocked to kind of read the development of Nike and how it evolved, is that they were growing for years and years and years, but they weren't profitable.
Yeah.
They were basically continually reinvesting, and that kind of resonated with me because I built my infrastructure in the same way. Instead of building up coaches and taking a lot of revenue from them so that the business could have free cash that I could take, I paid them more, and I took all the money that I was getting, investing into equipment, investing into new hires, investing in it to try to continue to grow. I'd want to know what his coping mechanisms were for that. Like how do you maintain belief in yourself when you're doing that type of stuff? Like that, in belief that you're making the right decisions. Because as an entrepreneur, you're kind of on an island, and as much as you can get outside insight from other people, and you can have mentors and all of that stuff, you carry all of that stress and risk on yourself. Like I put myself out here, and if shit goes south and I go, belly up, not that I'll care what other people think about necessarily, because I think I'll probably be drowning in my own disappointment. But I carry that failure much more as the face of the organization. So I'd kind of want to know what strategies he used that were successful to keep him on his path while that was happening.
It's that self-confidence thing we talked about earlier, right?
Yeah, maybe just belief that it's going to work out.
Yeah.
Thing.
Who was it? Is it Elon? I think they did some study of people that they assessed their risk-taking ability or their
Risk aversion.
Yeah, something like that. And it was like all to do with your upbringing. Apparently, a lot of it had to do. Were we talking about it on this trip, or someone was talking about it? And it was to do with like how they grew up and the circumstances they grew up in. It lent themselves to take more risks and to not be as attached to outcomes and that sort of thing. I think it has a lot to do with it, ultimately, with feeling confident about decisions or not worrying about the consequences, unfounded fears, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, good answer. Phil Knight's book, Shoe Dog?
Yeah, I think it's
Shoe
called
Dog.
Shoe Dog.
Yeah.
Does he do podcasts or interviews? I've never heard of him.
He wrote a good book.
Yeah. It is a solid book.
The problem with those guys is because they have so much money, they just can't be fucked doing podcasts to promote their book. Like regular people, like on every podcast, like get this book. He's like, bro,
Well, they also don't need to.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, who is this guy? Oh, he created Nike. I should read that. Like, it's not like, I think a lot of people that need the visibility or that need to get out there to promote things, I think it just kind of sells itself. LeBron posting with a picture of it just puts it out in social media automatically.
Yeah. Did you watch The Defiant Ones on Netflix?
Yes, I did.
How they created...
no, hold on. Is that with...
Dr. Dre, Jimmy Iovine?
I did.
That was like
awesome.
Beats, like how Beats got created. Like it was just an idea. He came to the house. He had like nothing to do. And he's like, cool, we're going to make these headphones. And then he's like, Dre, try this, try that, try this. And then they just made it cool. And it just went absolutely nuts. I mean, obviously they rush through things a little bit. But the fact that they had Team USA... all Team USA wearing the Beats headphones, and the Olympics was like, do not wear those headphones. And they were like, fuck you, we're going to wear these headphones. Like, that is crazy.
Yeah.
Well, the whole NBA, like, banned it in the NBA.
Yeah.
And they're like, I refuse. Like, I can't play without this around my neck.
They were even saying, like, people will put the headphones, like in Miami, they put the headphones on around their neck. And they walk down the street and they play music out of their phone. They don't even care. They just want people to see the beats. It's like a necklace.
Yeah,
it's like a $300 necklace.
That's crazy.
It's just amazing what they've done. Beats. Yeah, pretty awesome. Maybe I guess that was his book though. Dr. Dre's book.
Did he write about that?
No, he hasn't. But I mean, if he was to write a book, that would be the book. It would be that. What was it? 4.5 hours, 5 hours of documentary. It's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah.
Anyway. Second question, any sort of routine that you've introduced since the last podcast that you feel like is essential to the success of each day?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of talked about this one. I just had breathing work in here. I for a long time, I had an hour and a half every day at the end of my workday that I went home and I did like movement work, which is what I called it at the time, which is kind of what it is. But I would stretch, do balance drills, do coordination stuff, do gymnastics style stuff. And that kind of morphed over time because then my gymnastics stuff started to get developed to the level that I needed to be in here with the equipment. And so doing it at home without the equipment was like, okay, well, this is stupid. So I'm going to do that stuff here. And then when I go home, what's the best thing to prioritize? And then I realized over time I could kind of condense my movement work down to breathing. Like if I do some of that every day, and it's different some days, like if I'm overstimulated from like, I had to do a podcast and I was sick and got to go out and I got to meet with Noah and plan this thing. So like when I go home tonight, I'll probably just like meditate and breathe for 10 or 15 minutes, try to get to bed early, and not really think about that as being a step back in progress. Because I think for me, that was the hardest thing. It was like, how do I feel like I'm continually moving forward when my schedule is so erratic? I write structured programs for other people, so I'm aware what progression should look like for people to move forward. So when I had 4 or 5 days where I'm like, fuck, like I haven't done anything for my goals, I think the stress of thinking that was more like damaging than just not doing things. So being able to have a categorization system where I'm like, okay, I can always work on my movement every day and center it around breathing. And some days that shit could be really fucking hard where I'll do like breath retention drills or positional breathing stuff. And some days it's just easy where I'll just like, go for a long walk, go home, lay down, close my eyes, breathe for 10 or 15 minutes. And that just has paid dividends in terms of my progress and ability to stay committed to my own physical quests.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's that being that competitive athlete in the past and having that mindset of knowing what it's like to push yourself and then moving into the next stage of your life. I mean, that's what it really is. It's a new stage, like same as when you have kids and you get old, right? It's a different stage, just being okay with two devils on your shoulder, like, man, you should have pushed yourself harder. You should have just crushed yourself in that workout. What is wrong with you? What do you mean you haven't done double days? And it's like, I've had 4 days off. Like, it's okay. You can chill. Like, it's not the end of the world. Yeah. That just back and forth, I feel like, is just something you just got to manage over time. And everyone deals with it, right?
I think, but it's a tough balance because you get too soft with yourself. And
you can, yeah.
You end up like, holy shit, I'm out of shape. Like, not just compared to what I used to be, but like in general.
You're out of shape when other people tell you. Yeah. That's when you know. That's when you know.
Yeah, people you surround yourself
with. That's right.
Shittily or luckily, I'm surrounded by people that are really fucking fit all the time. Yeah. So I feel like that all the time. So it's a constant reminder, like, all right, you got to stay dialed in.
Yeah, it would have been all right with Travis around. Like, obviously, it's not that aesthetic. But as soon as Noah drops in, you're like, oh, fuck. Shit.
Yeah, well, and my coaches, too.
Yeah, that's
Mike
true.
was on the team. Kyle's like I call him Zangief from Street Fighter. Oh, Hairy, jacked wrestling dude.
That's true. He is Zangief. Yeah. That's good. Yeah. That's classic. Yeah, cool. Would there, for anyone trying to get into breath work or meditation, do you have like any simple advice for them? Like, have you used anything in the past, like an app or something that has helped you with it, or you just?
I mean, I'm not going to feel shameless to plug the course that I put out.
Yeah.
I think understanding there's so much shit out there about breathing that is experts that are more unidimensional. So like there's people out there that will talk about the benefits of nasal breathing and doing nasal breathing, and then that's all that they do, and they'll coach people on how to breathe through the nose and why it's good and why it's beneficial. And then there's people out there like Wim Hof structure, where some sort of hyperventilation strategy into breath retention drills and doing that for a really long period of time. And then there's people out there that have diaphragmatic breathing tutorials on how to do it on YouTube. And I think people get lost in a form of breathing as opposed to understanding what breathing as a holistic system is, what it's used for, why the body needs it, what tools you have available to you, how it applies to training. So I think the first thing is understanding the big picture. Now, I took like an FMS breathing course, which I reference in my course, that I found beneficial. But again, I haven't seen anything, and maybe just because I created it myself and with my team, I feel like, okay, well, this is cohesive enough to kind of get people started on understanding the more big picture. But I feel like that for me was the hardest thing to get to. And I fucked my way around trying to figure out the big picture for so many years through like all the little singular discipline experts before I realized how do I integrate this into something that's actually useful for me to understand, because understanding the biochemistry and how CO2 clearance and O2 uptake is important for respiration is important if you want to be an endurance athlete, but is that important if you need to be an endurance athlete with 225-pound barbell cleans? Like, it's different, because then it just gets a little bit more complicated.
Yeah, of
so
course.
For me, I feel like my current level of perspective about it is put into the course. So that's where I would say to go, because that's how I look at it now, as opposed to looking at it through the lens of one of the people that I would consider a mentor, or somebody that I learned from, or somebody whose information got put in and repackaged and reformatted into my own kind of system of methods.
How often would you say breath work is in somebody's program that does training think tank?
Well, I mean, I think breathing is in everybody's program all the time, because like anything you do requires you to be breathing. Like whether you're bracing under load, you have to be aware of your breath hold and be aware that like if you're under a barbell that's heavy enough of a load, you can't take in a normal, like you can't do a deep diaphragmatic breath. You can't soften your midline and allow yourself to expand. So you have to be aware of your respiratory system and how it's functioning under load. So it happens in strength work. It happens like calming the system down. It happens in endurance work. And I think maybe how much it is in each person's program is probably relative to where their athletic development is and which coach they're working with specifically, because we probably all have a different way of trying to skin the cat. And when is it time to make somebody, more aware of that type of stuff? If somebody's a pure beginner and they can't do a wall ball properly, it might not make sense to like have them doing a ton of breath awareness drills, because their number one goal is to do well in the open. So at some stage, it kind of evolves relative to where somebody is on their path. I'd say for Noah and Travis, just because I think most people are probably interested in higher level people, they'll leading into a competitive event, there will be almost no like mindful like respiration stuff, and it'll kind of self-organize them into kind of competitor mode unless they're doing meditative work at the end of the day. And then in the off season, there's going to be a lot more positional breathing drills, getting into a position, holding your breath, getting into a position and tensing and taking a breath through the tense, getting into a position and adding compression like a band around their rib cage and doing a breath against that resistance. And it kind of gets more complicated as the problems get more complicated. But I don't really get lost in that type of shit with people that are at a beginner level, because it's like, let's fucking crawl before we walk, and walk before we run, and run before we sprint type thing. And I feel like the current market, maybe it's just culture in general, is like, oh, let's get the most exciting, cool, novel stuff and blow your system up with it and do it every day until you're burnt out, and then you forget about it and still can't do basic stuff.
It's the instant gratification that we've unfortunately let ourselves to want over and over again. So some things you just can't skip.
And I feel so it's different for everyone, I guess, for each program.
All right, are we up to the third question? I think so. All right, something recently that you changed your mind on that for a while was a strong held belief of yours. You can't get sick.
This one I can't. I definitely didn't think that. This one I wanted to give you a pain in the ass answer that I don't really understand what beliefs are. But I was like, well, it's kind of a cop-out, so I don't want to do that, and I don't want people to be like, oh, this fucking guy, all he does is say it depends. So I think that one of the things that in my earlier career and maybe my earlier life, I thought that expertise was about being able to make accurate predictions. So I thought like the best stockbrokers in the world, like I went to school for finance and accounting, so I thought they were the best at being able to like, look through a report and be able to know like, okay, this company is going to succeed, I'm going to invest my money in there. Or now in my current profession, I thought a movement expert was somebody that could look at a movement problem. Somebody's got knee pain and be like, okay, this is the issue, we're going to use this method, and then that method's going to take the pain away. And I thought that their ability to create those predictions would be like very close to 100% as you got closer and closer to a greater level of expertise. Or a sports announcer being able to predict the outcomes of an event would be able to like accurately predict who would make it. And there might be people out there that make that a little easier. Like if you bet on Matt Frazier, there's probably going to be pretty good odds over the last couple of years that he'd be able to do it. But over a broad course of a population, I think what I've realized over time now is that the level of human error is so high that in order to be an expert, you really just need to barely be better than 50% in your predictive powers. Like people are wrong so much more frequently than you could possibly imagine. Problems are so much more complicated than we can possibly understand. So if somebody's in pain, there's so many reasons that they can be in pain. Like simple things. If somebody's got knee pain and like, you know, a biomechanist or a PT, like look at the knee, take a goniometer, look at it, and I look at the person, I'm like, yeah, but you're 30 pounds overweight. Like, why don't we give you a nutritional plan and see if your body is still in pain on your knee after you lose the body weight? Like, there are so many different strategies and routes that you could take to try to solve problems. And I feel like being an expert is really, not that it's not hard, but that I've taken them off pedestals and maybe realized like, oh, they're just people. Like, and people are wrong so much. And the bravado that people put out there that's part of marketing is something I never really wanted to be a part of. Like, I never wanted to be like, oh, you know, you follow these methods and you're more likely to win. You do this and, you know, you're guaranteed to go there. And I think it's something beneficial that people should understand is like, you know, if the organization continues to grow in visibility and I become more popular, that like, I'm going to get so much shit wrong. I'm going to do so much shit that I'm going to look back on that I think is wrong. And everybody does. And it doesn't preclude you from becoming successful or becoming an expert by doing that. So I think I've really changed my mind on that and maybe also reduced the pressure on myself to be something that I couldn't possibly obtain. Like, there's no level of knowledge I could have gotten that would allow me to like, oh, you know, I know exactly what to do to this person to make them a champion. Like, it's just an unrealistic way of looking at the world. It's too complicated and chaotic.
I think those people just present themselves really well, right? And whatever they put out there is just so craftfully done that it does position them like they can't, you know, they're faultless, right? And then you just tell yourself a story that like, wow, he really is like the master of yoga or whatever, you know, whatever it might be. So,
but it's funny.
It's easy to do.
Reading or watching documentaries on gurus and like what happens to a lot of them over time, and like I don't know, just maybe making sure that you don't become one of those people. Is important. At least for myself.
Yeah, I had a similar realization we're talking about testimonials a lot on this trip, like with business and stuff. And like you walk into a gym and they have like 50 testimonials, like kind of like this on the wall, right? You're like, wow, it's incredible. Like, so much results, but they've probably had over 1,000 clients or more, and you can't see any of them. So like your actual percentage of success rate like doesn't matter. You might have like a 1% success rate and a hall of fame of testimonials, and someone would walk in like, man, you just can't lose in this building.
Well, I think it does matter, but it's just it doesn't matter for marketing purposes. Like it will matter in terms of like long-term reputation. I think it's something I've always said as a coach, that it's probably more important to observe your failure rate than your success rate, because the successful people, like we talked about coaching Noah, it's like it was kind of like a no-lose situation for me. It's like one of the best athletes in the world who had a pretty good track record of winning and doing really well other than one bad games experience, and then I get to take him on, and you know, if he does better than that, it's like, oh, I'm a great coach. But the reality is I probably have, you know, way more athletes do worse from year to year, or way more athletes that have continued to go after something and not achieved it. And I think having loyalty after those experiences and having them think that you're on the right track is an important part of coaching that doesn't necessarily get talked in marketing, but it has been really beneficial in terms of like growing business and growing business reputation.
I even think if he did badly, everyone would just forget and not really notice.
If what?
If he didn't do well and he just moved on, it wouldn't even be that bad. It's like really is like a win. Win-win. People pay attention to what's going on at the top. Somebody interviewed me about the rope climb thing last year,
And I was just like, dude, he was the 4th best athlete in the world, and he took last place on that event. Like, it's not a weakness, but nobody would be talking about it if he wasn't in 4th. Like, if he was in the last heat and it happened, no one would have been like, oh, he blew it. Like, it was because he was doing well.
Yeah.
Like, he was in 2nd leading there. Like, that's why we're talking about him in the first place. Let's not try to point out the one shitty thing that happened over that weekend and maybe the entire like other body of work that was successful that went into being in the position on the final day to even have that opportunity. But yeah, it is what it is.
That's how it goes. People need something to talk about.
Yeah.
Final question, 2 parts. A favorite quote and a favorite book that you've been recommending recently.
Now I'm not prepared because I thought it was just a quote or a book.
Oh, well, you can do either or.
No, it's all good. I put
Training journal.
Yeah, no.
Favorite book.
Yeah, really good intro.
Great forward.
No man will make a great leader who wants to do it all himself or get all the credit for doing it, by Andrew Carnegie. And I think that one's just more of a quote for me as a reminder. I created the business with the thought process that I needed people with a bunch of different expertise, and now it's manifesting that way. Like, you know, the best athletes in the organization are kind of in some ways carriers for the methods, right? Like those are the people that give social proof. Having Chris on and the ability to create really quality and creative content that people want to watch, like not just me sitting down and talking like about something I want to talk about or my coaches are excited about, but being able to put creative flair on it and think about how it's portrayed and whether people are going to like it and pay attention to the comments and get insight into it has totally upgraded the ability of the entire thing. And I think a lot of people create their brands around them. And I made the decision when I first started, and I think I made that decision out of insecurity because I really didn't want to be in the spotlight. I didn't like attention. I didn't want people to know who I was. I didn't want that external pressure. I'm not in that state mentally anymore. I don't really give a shit. I'm comfortable getting out there if I need to get out there and promoting. But now I feel so much more confident having a support structure of people, coaches that I really trust, athletes that I respect, like even if they don't do well. Like how many people have an athlete that's been to the games 4 times like Trav that doesn't make it back that are going to tell that story, like that actually still feel like the character, the fight, the ability to balance being a parent and a gym owner and have a training partner that made the games and still be able to be able to put his own personal emotional stuff aside and be like, I'm going to help prepare him for the games and finish this season out for the organization or for me or whatever. Like to me, that's like a positive validation that we're on the right track. And so I read that quote and it's kind of it's just good because you never really get validation of whether or not your leadership is going in the right direction until the future. So I don't know if all the decisions that I'm making right now that I'm fucking stressed out about are gonna be good. So having that was just kind of a quote that maybe as a reminder to myself was like, okay, well, not wanting my own ideas and only to highlight the successes and me being the personal thing is good, and it's has the potential to lead to a really positive place down the road.
You said it was from a book.
No, I said it was from Andrew Carnegie.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
It's not from a book?
I don't know if it's from a book or not.
It reminds me of Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. Have you read that
I've never
book?
read it. I actually have it on my phone, but I've never read it.
It's a really good book.
Yeah.
I've listened to it once and I've read it through once as well.
I've read...
Start with Why?
I've read that one. I never read his other one, though.
Tell him your title.
Oh my God! It starts with what's the point? Oh, fuck. Yeah. When he first came on board, we were trying to do content, and I don't know. I'm not comfortable doing it anyway. Just I don't know how to start. I don't know how to end. Like, what are we talking about? And he was like, just start with what's the point? Like, get out there and explain. And we tried to make a joke about it. It just ended up being fucking so bad. And so now we laugh about it all the time. So I'm going to write a book called Start With What's the Point? It's not verbosely talking about bullshit for a long time without any purpose.
Yeah, that's good. we'll call it there unless you can bring a book to mind. And the movement course is what we talked about a lot. And I'm looking over at a to-do list on in Chris's room. Movement course to do. So it's got like 8 components to it. So I imagine when that's all ticked, it'll be ready to go.
Yeah.
Obviously sounds like it's kind of been the heart and soul of all the knowledge and time that you've been investing in terms of an educational course over the last year, 2 years, 3 years, however long. When can people get it? When will it be available?
Yeah.
People will be happy to know as well. Point 8 on this to-do list is take out bad sections. Excellent. There'll be no bad sections.
Bad sections whatsoever.
Yeah.
I'm not committing to a date because every deadline I've set for this fucking thing has not worked out. But I do.
We're fucking getting this thing right.
Yeah, we've really tried to make sure that it was a good course. That like when people bought it, that they either had their frame of perception about movement expanded and were like, holy shit, like now I kind of understand better like when somebody says movement training, or they can integrate models from the movement culture into their current training models, and that they had methods. That was when we created the first movement course, that was one of the criticisms, was that there was a lot of science and a lot of information. People felt like they understood the concepts better, but they didn't know what to do. And so I didn't want that to be the case. So I think my goal is to get it out by the 4th of July, which I didn't want to commit to.
Okay.
But
it's pretty soon.
I got sick for 2 weeks and haven't done anything on it. So I'd like it to be out before the games. If it's not out before the games, it's going to come out when we have it ready, and we'll publicize it, put it on our YouTube page, put it on our Instagram.
We'll promote it as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
But I don't know the exact date.
Yeah, that's cool.
And then right after that is when we're going to finalize the group program. So
right.
Hopefully those things will come out like within a couple months of one another.
And then for people listening right now, we don't have an exact date, but we're thinking somewhere around mid to the end of October / early November. Max is not promised, but very keen to come to Australia with potentially Travis or Noah and whoever else to do seminars. I think at least the feedback from our audience has been there is a lot of demand for Training Think Tank to come out. And when we did our Functional Fitness Festival at the start of the year, I think for some reason some people thought you were coming out, and then they were really disappointed when you weren't. I was like, we never said that, but all right. But it just shows there's demand, and I mean, Max needs to learn to surf. So
one thing that I did for a really successful camp I did in Ireland was I got a list of the people that were interested, and then I surveyed them and created a curriculum for those people so I could make all the topics specific to them. So I don't know if we could do something like that. If not, you could delete this whole portion.
No,
we can do something.
Yeah,
like
we can
that,
do something.
Collect emails, maybe even to solidify a date. One of the things that we do is survey, like, if there's like
optimum dates,
a month window that we're not aware of something going on in Australia, that we could say like, hey, what's the best date? And here are some topics that I would think about. Click like your maybe 3 priorities. That might just be a beneficial way of getting it set the right way for that audience, because I don't really always know who I'm going to talk to, and I like to make sure I talk like to the people that I'm going to see.
Yeah, we'll make a page now, the marmilesproject.com/TTT. It's not live yet, but by the time you're hearing this, it will be. And all that stuff Max just talked about will be in there, and so you guys can express your interest and get on the pre-sale list and all that sort of stuff if you want to come to the seminars. So
let's go on Steve Irwin's birthday instead.
I don't know.
You don't know.
I don't know. Steve Irwin is like more popular overseas than he is in his own country. Put it that way.
Maybe you and Bindi can present together.
Bindi's his daughter. Yeah.
That was what I thought, but I was like, I'm not going to say it because it might not be.
So on behalf of Raf and myself, so that our audience hears, and Steve, thank you, Max, for housing us in the condo. Thank you, Chris, for being a part of the podcasting and helping us out. We really appreciate it, and it's been a lot of fun.
Awesome.
It's been like a little overseas American Georgian family, so it was really fun. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming.
Thank you
very much.